parking lot for later.
Lower priority.
Thorough, well, it may be high priority, but it, or just as high priority, but it needs more work in terms of development. Like for instance, today in one of the recommendations was, okay, we hope that all the ballots will be saved, and Ernie said they are, and they're still in their miscellaneous, bags. And then the recommendation is that be given to Judge Hensley or to somebody else to do an audit. Well, I would be putting audit in the parking lot,
Okay.
for that, because that I can't do anything about that right now, today.
Mhm.
But I can start working on some of these other things that are what I consider the lower hanging fruit, that I can get my office around to start preparing us for the perfect election.
Almost perfect.
Yeah, the almost perfect election and the exemplary election protocols and code that we want to have rolled up through the Assembly's election and committee as recommendations that came grassroots and on up, and if there are embellishments and things like that are needed at that level, but I'd rather start with the people who actually observe the election than the people, to paraphrase Elby and Ernie and others on the Assembly that got it, after the initial shock of having to reconcile everything was already manifested, if that makes sense to everybody. And then, Barbara,
We're with you.
yeah. We're doing that. So if we start with the part that the dog didn't lie on and resurrected it, and I feel for you, I have done a huge list from home on my, dutifully logged into my Assembly email and done everything in there only to be timed out and have the whole thing lost forever. So, my heart goes out to you because at 3 in the morning it's not fun to start over. Okay, so I'm just going to run down the list. A more secure and organized ballot vault should be found. Let's see. I think that we want to do, I don't think that that's a parking lot. So we got to do another one, which,
Do we need to say what secure and organized entails?
I think that might be two separate issues too.
okay.
Because I think that,
So let's put
Because
this
I know
one
you're
up
limited
as
by
just
space. I
as
mean, that's
vault.
fine.
I mean, we'll just deal with the vault.
I think,
Issues. Yes.
I think that there are some security issues with the vault that we would be able to address. I think that we can change so it's not a key lock, so that it's a code lock. I think there's a few things that we could address. But we are limited by space within this building and stuff like that. But there's things that, without fail, will be addressed next year as far as the organization of that vault would be.
Okay, so let's put under vault issues, security,
And some of the big
Space.
issues are easy to fix.
yeah, security, space, organization. And so even though it's kind of like a parking lot issue, we can kind of capture some, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit parking lot issue, okay? And so, but what I want to do now, rather than work the issues, is get them up there.
Okay.
Okay, so that, and then we're gonna pick them off and work as many as we can, but if we could just kind of do the sort now. But as you're thinking of things, does anybody need any extra paper to write on? As you're thinking of things as everybody's talking, and you think of things to do on the vault issue, then write them down. When we get to working the issue on the vault, then we can go back and do that. Am I in accord? Okay. So hand count workers shouldn't be given AccuVote numbers at the outset. That encourages them to make mistakes. Okay, so this is a recount protocol, is that right? Okay, so let's do it in protocols.
Protocols, by the way, is an O.
Oh, sorry.
I have my little automatic
Yeah.
spell checker turned on.
Okay, we got,
Issues out here.
yeah, you need, you're too short
I'm
of one
gonna,
end.
no, I'm gonna grade myself.
I regular job. I'm a publication specialist.
Oh, you
Yeah,
picked
yeah,
that
yeah,
up.
yeah. Okay, all right, so we'll all get that. So this is a recount.
See you guys later, Harry's
Okay.
here.
Yeah, because we had 3, and she was already gonna go.
So that's your spot.
She had something to go into, so.
I'm sorry, I'm just disturbed because I didn't know this meeting was continuing, and I was tied up by a member of the.
Well, we just started, period.
Just started.
Uh-huh.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you, I
this is our,
appreciate that.
this is, and any assembly member was welcome to come, but we didn't have any RSVPs. This is a staff work session where I've enrolled the folks here to help, the clerk and myself in, yeah, go ahead, Trish. In, sorting the issues that they presented today, okay? So we are on the second bullet here, hand count shouldn't be, okay, so this is protocols for recount, okay, then under recount, it is a protocol for the blind hand count. Is that, can we call it
Yes.
that? Okay, all right, and just for any of my clients who happen to be here, that's absolutely right. In anybody who does any kind of work with private industry, when you're trying to compare one number to another to validate them, the best way to do that is in a blind. So that would be something that I think we can easily incorporate. Okay, so then we have chain of custody and ballot accountability should be tracked from beginning to end with every ballot accounted for. At the end of an election, the ballot accountability report should be checked against the vote count as a matter of course, the discrepancies addressed. Okay, so in my ignorance, is the ballot accountability report,
Filled out by the election workers at the end of the night. And they check the number of ballots that they received from the clerk's office against the number of ballots voted, and they report how many ballots they're returning unvoted to City Hall.
There should be serial numbers, I think, for the printer, the
There-
clerk's office. So when the clerk makes distribution, we can count all the way from the time they go out the printing press, to the end of the process.
They're numbered on the ballot stubs, which are returned also to the clerk's office as part of their election supplies, and we hold on to the ballot stubs until.
okay, so it looks like, and so is the protocol for doing that in both code and in the worker election manual, is that how that works? For the report that's filled out at the election days?
As far as, is that?
It's not in Title 28.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not in Title 28, and so let's put that, so under protocols, we got, and then we'll see how many of them we should move into Title 28 maybe. So under protocols, another set of protocols is the ballot accountability.
From printer to.
Well, one thing that is not currently done is after the election, there's not an independent, not someone from outside of that precinct does not verify the ballot accountability report versus the statements of votes cast or anything. So that is a new thing that isn't currently done.
Yeah,
That could be considered.
I'm the person who contributed that particular recommendation, I think, because it sounds like my wording.
Right.
And that came out of partly because I took, after Linda had discovered weirdnesses in our 15 precincts, I did a spreadsheet of the entire of everything.
Uh-huh.
The draft accountability report that was given to the assembly at the work session on, I think, well, it was that assembly work session right after the
Right, on the
election.
13th, yeah.
And I put all those numbers in, and then I also put in the numbers for the actual AccuVote count. And that's one of those things that's included in this report, that spreadsheet that I did. And it's just wildly amazing, the discrepancies that were in there where
Okay,
some.
so let me interrupt. So under ballot accountability, what the issue there is, and I'm hearing you, is that the routine comparison of ballots going out to ballots recorded in the machine. Is that where we're
Yeah,
at?
basically
Okay.
you want everything to add
Okay,
up.
Okay, now remember, I'm not working it here,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
identify, so we know what it is that we're looking for to compare.
Yeah.
And as Amanda says, we don't have this in there, so we want to make sure that we can get going out to ballots in the AccuVote machine, I guess.
Julia?
Yes.
If I could just ask a question on that, is ballot accountability when the ballots from all sources are accounted for at the end of election night or post-election?
Amanda
question.
Yeah. The ballot accountability report refers to a document that is part of the election materials that's given to each precinct. And they take the number of ballots they receive from the office, and then they go through and they count the number of signatures in the precinct register. Yeah, this is what it looks like.
And they're supposed to complete that at the precinct?
They fill it out at the
Before they
end.
leave?
At the end of the night,
Okay,
correct?
because I know I heard that there were many of those that were not completed because it was such a.
Right, but we're,
Okay.
just so you understand the focus of what we're doing here, Harriet, I'm using this group right now, and the committee that you're on is welcome to come in and make whatever investigation that you're doing, but in the limited time that they gave me today, I am trying to do a gap analysis, where we need to plug gaps about what happened. And I don't really, for the purposes of here, what happened is helpful to figuring out what the gaps are. It's not helpful for me right now to try and figure out what happened. I just want the gaps, so I can make sure, as Ernie's asked us to do, that it don't happen again. Okay.
And then
Yeah.
it goes along with this. Jean did another spreadsheet comparing the accountability report with the official ballot receiving list and came up with a whole nother list of discrepancies.
Okay, so now we want and to, okay, that's good. And to ballot, the unused ballot receiving list. Is that it? The return ballot.
All receiving, because what I noted was what ballots were actually issued to the precinct.
Yep, Amanda.
The printer creates for us a document that we distribute to all of the precincts that they sign when they pick up their ballots. And it contains the number of ballots that is issued to that civic precinct. And so each precinct chairperson signs it, and the clerk's office maintains those copies. So we know that 500 ballots were issued to precinct 300 or whatever. So there's a couple different documents. There's the receiving, which in that refers to what the precincts actually receive. And then I think that ballot accountability deals with what comes back to City Hall, just so everyone understands.
Okay, so, and to ballots returned, I just want to capture that somehow we have to have a reconciliation to the ballots, plural, returned.
So that all the unique reports match.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we can keep that. Okay, so over here in Title 28, we may want to describe that ballot, we may need to codify ballot accountability. And it may end up looking like something a little bit different than what this ballot accountability report several reports, and they don't all, so we're gonna look for efficiencies
Yeah.
in.
The number, ballot numbers.
Yeah.
Good place to put them.
Yeah, yeah, so describe ballot accountability report in code. Okay. And so Harriet, we're looking at their presentation, just because it happened to be handy, and I just got this today, and I wasn't quite sure how I was gonna, to sort everything out, but they gave us a nice list to sort. And so I'm not working the issues now. Right now, I'm trying to get them up on the board so that we can peel them off and have me work. Okay, so I'm only on number 3. Is that right? Okay, so now we got seals. Okay, so seals on memory cards and on bags. Okay, so this is the AccuVote machine thing. You can write AccuVote if you can reach that high. We need
I
that
feel
stool.
for
We
you.
need Jennifer
Right here.
Johnston's stool. All of us. Okay, and so this is seals on machines and on bags. Seals on machines and ballot bags.
And I purposely played with one of those bags. It is a bear and a half to get them actually closed, so you can put the seals on, some of them anyway. And so along with that, perhaps get bags that are
Okay, so a
easier
bag
to close and
review.
seal.
Yeah, a bag, ballot bag. Ballot bag.
Bag on it.
Ballot bag review of the ballot bag, so we know what it is, so somehow,
I'm sorry, that's.
bag review.
Review what numbers.
Yeah, ballot bag review. Okay, and then I want that to be added over here with our vault issues. Because I'm kind of seeing a picture of low-hanging fruit security. Yeah, go ahead.
Can we combine recommendations?
Yeah.
Because we have another recommendation in here that says the seals should be numbered,
Yeah.
so. yeah,
Okay,
please.
so over here on the on the bag, yeah.
Sounds like a
See, this is
great
why,
show.
okay, so we have the ballot bag, no, just put, oh yeah, okay, no, that's good, just like that, yeah, you can put it on the top, that's okay. All right, so we want to, and so I'm gonna write that also in my thing, we need to number, so the idea of numbering the seals, I thought was an excellent one, by the way, in that then you can tell if it's, with the white tags, I mean, I'm not somebody who's thinking that this happened, okay, so let me just make sure that everybody knows, I do not think that this happened, but I didn't have any way to prove that it didn't, because when you're using, the same ties that I use for my raspberries, guess what, the next year I flip them, and then I start out with new ones,
There's
so.
always sealing wax and, little brass stamps. I'm sure we've all got a few of those.
Can I add something on
In our desks.
the numbering of the seals? I'm a poll worker.
Uh-huh.
I've done this for a number of years. On the numbering of the seals, they should match the machine they're being, the numbers should match the machine.
All right, so we have a machine number and a seal number.
I don't know if there's
Yeah.
a number of the machine, but there
Okay,
should.
all right, so we're gonna
We
have.
could tie that into the memory card number too.
Yeah,
I mean, we're-
okay, machine number, and then they should match seals, number.
They don't match track.
Something about the machine,
Seals and memory cards?
something, but anyway.
And or, the debit card.
Okay. Okay, there should be at least 2 people accountable to the people of Anchorage. Amanda's not accountable. Not just a company representative present when machine memory cards, GMs, are programmed. Okay, so it's like the recount, it's like observers.
Can I
Yeah,
explain?
go for it.
And understand that some things we're gonna share here are hearsay, that we don't.
Yeah.
But the hearsay information was that, Ms. Duke was, doing programming on the machine with only the, representative, Dominion, whatever, representative, with her. And we feel, and whoever put this in here obviously didn't feel that a paid contractor makes for a good second person, that there should be another person involved in when a machine is being programmed. I personally think there should be a techie there, but that's a whole nother recommendation. We'll get to those.
I absolutely think a techie
Yeah,
should be
sure.
there, but there should also be someone besides that techie there.
Right.
And I also verified it with Lupe, who was the previous election chief, that whenever she programmed the cards or the gems, that the only person there with her was the Dominion representative.
And that's good or bad?
Bad.
We need
Okay, I
to-
just want to make sure the board's saying that when Lupe did it, it was different, and
No.
it's good, and okay, so it's
No,
like
no,
not.
no, I mean, I
it's a
actually
protocol.
was telling her,
Okay.
hey,
It's bad.
Okay,
problem with
so-
So you need at least 2 people there.
Yeah, okay, so,
Check the bill.
so so this is gonna go under AccuVote, and it's also gonna go under our secure, I'm gonna name this one security issues, or something at the very, very top, yeah. Okay, so, so while you're there, so ballot bag review is another underlined issue, just like Lawrence was, okay, thank you. Okay, now the third underlined issue is, public observers / tech for machine programming.
Can I have an idea just about
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Just maybe public notice of it? And then we can come back to it.
Yeah, we can come back,
Just so-
that's good. Yeah, we're gonna have public notice, and you're gonna have to do the programming in the library, because everybody's gonna wanna see. But, okay, I mean. Okay, so then over here.
Right, yeah.
Okay, so over here, we want to have the same thing on there. And I put it here because on the things that even so it's this, it's still an AccuVote machine issue, but it's one that I think we can take care of. It's just a lot easier to as long as we're gonna use AccuVote machines, if we're gonna ward off any unnecessary, I'm all for on the AccuVote machines, warding off any unnecessary questions. Questions that, you know, if they're on reliability of the AccuVote machines, I'm all for plugging as many holes as we can and then see where we are about those machines. Okay, that's just, you know, my observation. Okay, so.
Can I ask an
yeah.
overall question here really quick?
Yeah.
Is someone going to actually be typing this up and sending it out in an email or anything like that? Or is this just gonna be for your own use for the work you're gonna be doing?
Yeah, yes. Okay,
So that's
yeah, so when I
She's looking for a
facilitate.
blogger that's having to volunteer to do this.
My problem is I have arthritis, and so it hurts to write.
Right.
So I was gonna, if I don't have to write, then, and it's gonna come to me, that I don't have to worry about.
Yes,
taking all the
so
notes.
so thank you for bringing that up. When I do these facilitation sessions, I try to get things up in there, and then I have a dutiful Vanna who's presented herself here for you.
Yes.
And then it comes out, and then it goes out, and then, you know, you can come back and, you know, do any kind of correction. So
I wanna be
that's the
in on that email that gets
Yes,
it. Okay,
yes,
good.
yes, and so that's why we have a
Cool.
sheet, you need to sign it, of people, because, you know, there's no point in having a think tank if you ain't gonna be thinking after we do it, right? And
If you're only gonna be tanking.
so, yeah, you're just gonna be taking, and then I'm gonna be taking, you know, so that's not good. And then Ernie will, you know, it won't be good for Ernie, who had to leave in there, but you know, it's not. The guy went through enough stepping into the kimchi here, and so, we wouldn't want him to have to suffer another election like this one. Right, Dick?
Yeah. Sometimes it's him, not me.
Right, I know, so is everybody, so, I mean, not that way, I didn't mean now we're at all ballots voted in a specific precinct should be issued and stored with that precinct for audit, including question ballots. Okay, so this goes under potential protocols, I think. And so the protocol is that should be issued, all ballots voted in issues. Okay, so this is where, Jeannie, let me ask you, is this where you guys were talking about maybe having a stamp?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna put it as that stamp thing.
Mhm.
Okay, so this would be a rubber, precinct stamp to track ballots and in queue ballots by precinct. And then put after it, or in parentheses, issuance and storage, or issuance and storage.
And Julia, just so, it's clear that with the current Title 28, the question ballots are supposed to be sorted by precinct, which they weren't. So, when the question ballots came in, instead of leaving them with each individual precinct, they were all chucked into a pile and then dealt with. And then,
Amanda, go ahead.
So there's a couple issues that go on with that. There's
Okay.
the precinct that they're voted at, but the majority of question ballots, typically in an election, are people voting at a precinct. So it's not always necessarily the precinct that it was voted at, but then they're sorted into the precinct that they're registered in. So that's
right.
what the sorting happened. They all came in the red bags from each individual precinct, but then the election commission went through and sorted them based on, they looked at what precinct they're residing in and then put it into what and then what precinct they're registered in and what precinct they're residing in. So there's sometimes 3 precincts that are involved in question ballots. If you vote at precinct 330, but you live in precinct 335, but you're registered at precinct 340, they kind of have to look at all 3 of those things along the way. So that's where the sorting of the ballots go. It's not sort of arbitrarily sorted. They use the state database to see where the person lives and where they're registered.
So at that point in time then, who gets the vote? Because as we understood, and we could be wrong, or at least as I understood, and I could completely be wrong, that they were counted then by race. So were they actually counted by precincts, or were they counted by race, and at what point in time, where does that vote go? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not entered back into the precinct totals.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yeah.
Okay, what we found out from this election was that everything that is a question ballot, and unfortunately in this election, all the ballots that weren't truly question ballots, but were sample ballots because registered voters ran out of ballots, were, as you said, pulled together. And generally, the practice has been, no matter what the code says, the practice has been that all question ballots are counted by race instead of by precinct. They're not sorted and then entered back into the, they're sorted oftentimes by the precinct of where the person's registered, because the question ballot has to be looked at, has to be scrutinized, has to find the person, that the person is actually a registered voter in a different precinct. But they don't go in and open up the card for that machine and re-enter them into that tally card on that machine. They keep it as a separate count. And in this election, for the first time, just happenstance, they kept them bundled by precinct, just because it was such an unusual number of question ballots. So I want to have a whole other sheet devoted to question ballots, because there's a whole bunch of things.
Yeah,
that we
if they're
have.
hand counted or something else.
Yeah, was a really good idea. Do you wanna add something?
If that happens, if they're taken, if the question ballots are separated, wouldn't that throw the ballot accountability reports off?
It's after they come back from the, so the ballot accountability report has already been entered, because that's done by the precinct workers. And so it's at City Hall, like when the commission receives them, that they sort them based on
The cutoff for the ballot accountability report predates when they have this, so they have to put it back in there. So it's not a good, there's an awkward situation there. And so I can't answer your question about whether it throws that off, because that's kept differently, but it doesn't help any, okay? So the things that I'd like to record here from this about question ballots are, do we count them by race or by precinct in our new vision? Okay, and so we want a count under there. First bullet is to be counted by precinct or race. The second thing is going to be, if it's going to be counted by precinct and it's a machine race, and it's an overall machine count, do we create a protocol? I'm not saying that this is a good idea. So if precinct, then, yeah, if precinct, then machine count. Or hand count. And this is why I'm talking about this. If they're gonna be tracked and counted, again by precinct, then that means that the machine has to be, the card in the machine and the techies and all that business comes back in to unlock the count on the machine, to reload and then reload the thing. So you have all these numbered, and Amanda, this is where you're gonna chirp in if I got it wrong, but you have all, in our vision so far, we have numbered machines out there now, right? At the different precincts, and we got numbered seals, and we got some kind of things that are internally consistent. And they all come in, well, we're not gonna, you're gonna have to fire up all those machines before you take the cards out. So that's not how they do it. They just fire up one machine and enter in everything by race, no matter what precinct it is. That's kind of how my sense of how the recount how the initial tally is done now. So if you're gonna fire up more, I'd have 119 machines
Reopen
go.
119 races to scan what could be, 2 to 5. Usually we supply each precinct with 25 question envelopes, and usually there's not 25 question voters typically at an election, save for.
Right, but we're not gonna use our usual anymore, because we had a perfect storm, and we're gonna make sure we're not having that anymore. But no matter what, there is the problem that if you're gonna do it by race, if you're gonna do it by precinct, then, and it was a machine count race, you gotta figure out, and there's a way to do it, to put a card back in a precinct card back in the single machine that you're using down there, and add to it, okay? And then there's also the idea that if it's a question ballot and you're gonna do it by precinct, you might just have to hand count. Yes?
Yeah, well, I'm questioning why the AccuVote machine has to be involved in coming up with a summary for each precinct. Because the AccuVote machine counts them at the polling place and then use them to count later. But at some point, you have a set of numbers that you hope are pure numbers, ignoring how we got to those numbers. That it would be nice to know how many voters voted in each precinct. I'm looking at a statement of votes cast from a previous election usually show up in this precinct. We gotta print that many ballots. That number's gonna be filled out forever. If we don't know how many voters actually showed up in each precinct, whatever all the numbers were worked back in. Am I
Well, the people who voted the question ballots, for a true question ballot, as opposed to running out of ballots, in a question ballot, the reason why they're voting at that precinct is that they aren't registered. And so they have to have a question ballot. They aren't on the register, they're voting out a precinct. So I don't so I'm not understanding how, I don't understand your question, I guess, on that.
What I'm saying is, if in a normal election with, say, 30,000 voters show up and 5,000 of them are, 60,000 voters show up, 5,000 of them are question ballots, and those question ballots are never assigned to any precinct as to where, in the final outcome, how are you ever gonna know what precinct 615's average voter turnout is?
They are assigned to a precinct.
It's not average voter turnout that the 70% comes from, it's 70% of registered voters, which is not affected at all. It's a separate issue.
But there is somewhere in the process that I recall that the average number of voters that shows up in a precinct is used to calculate something in advance of election day.
I don't know how they can do that because they don't currently, they do
Yeah,
not
I don't know about
keep
that.
track
So
of
maybe
it.
you could find your, I'll try to find what that is.
I'll try to find out.
Go ahead.
I'll try.
I'll get to you.
I lean to hand count myself, but if you needed a machine count for some reason, is there any reason why you couldn't open?
I'm sorry, I'm having trouble hearing you. Tom, do you want to share with the rest of us what you're sharing with Harriet, and then we'll move on to the person who's trying to talk?
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. My comment was that I thought that might have been the Jacqueline Duke standard that we were thinking of here, where there was sort of an informal policy of how many we're actually going to distribute to each. I believe her comment was the way we determined how many ballots we were actually distributing to each precinct was based on how many people had previously voted, whereas the number of ballots printed is the 70% of the registered voters. So that's the only case I can think of where how many people who previously voted.
Okay, so
in
let me
previous
just back up to,
elections.
and we just have to excuse me here. Let's back up to that, because in Title 28, even though it's in there, we want to show it as a protocol, and in Title 28 underlined emphasis about how you determine how many ballots go to the precinct. So this is number of ballots to the precinct, and over here has to be number of ballots to the precinct as fleshing out the 70% rule. Okay, now, and so what I got from what you said before was you're somebody who tends to lean toward a hand count anyway, and,
I guess it's a bad.
okay,
If for some reason somebody felt the need to machine count question ballots, is there no reason why you could have one machine specifically for that, and you could have the precincts, like a separate pile for each precinct, and then run them for each precinct and get your tally and then run another one? I mean, do you have to open all the machines, or can you just
I
get your
think that
total
you
and then
can
add it?
well, you can do it with one machine. What they do
Somebody
before is that they open up the card, but go ahead, Amanda.
I'm sorry to interrupt. There is a question and absentee card that is used, and it has all the different card styles loaded. So as people may or may not be familiar with, we have about 34 different card styles, and so there is a card that's created that has all the different card styles so that it can run all the question and absentee. But I'm hearing your comment about you could run it on one card but still maintain them separately by precinct so that that information is also retained by precinct, which might be a good way to address this issue. Is run it all through on one card,
do it now on the machine, on one machine, but they don't.
They don't subtotal by precinct.
Yeah, they just do it by race. She was ahead of both of you, so I'm
Okay.
gonna go to her.
I want to go back to the question ballots. At my precinct, which was the cooking and housing, we had people who changed rooms. We had about 5 people who had to vote question ballots, but they were in our precinct.
It updates the voter registration, and that's another really good use for the question ballots.
But those people were in our precinct, so would they, when it's divvied out, they would come to our precinct?
Yeah.
Even though they voted?
They voted on question ballots, but the state uses that information provided on those question ballot envelopes to update the voter registration so that next election, when they go to vote, they're in there correctly and they won't need to vote a question ballot. So that's really common. I worked at the precinct chair at the senior center, which it's common there too, where people.
I'm wondering, in this election, were those people put into the pile of all question ballots and they
Yeah.
weren't counted with our precinct?
Yes, that's what happened. That was a problem. We don't want that to happen again.
I'm confused, I'm sorry.
Yes, I am now too.
So if I'm at your precinct, let's say the Pioneer Home, and I walk in and my name's on the voter register, and I sign the voter register, why would I be receiving a question ballot?
You wouldn't sign, if your name is on there, but your address is incorrect, or another example is, let's say you got married and your last name changed, you would use the question ballot as a way to update all of your information.
Okay, and the question ballot basically is just, we're really talking about an envelope with a normal ballot.
Correct. It's the question ballot envelope, and that information is given directly to the state. That's on the floppy, and they use it to update.
But if my name is on the register and my address hasn't changed, is there any reason why I would be receiving a question ballot envelope to fill out?
Your name is correct on the register.
Correct.
And your address is correct.
Correct.
Then you should sign the register and vote a regular ballot.
Okay.
Right, and we know that that didn't happen.
Right.
Okay, so just so that everybody understands, we're working on
I'm
this.
biting my tongue right now.
Yeah, but just so that we get this out, what I understand now happened, much through the work of everybody in this room, one piece at a time, was that because there was a ballot shortage at half the precincts, when people came in and were giving what I'm just gonna call a non-conforming ballot, something to vote on, that could not be read from by the machine, instead of that, and they signed the register for being in, name correct, address correct, the protocols in place would have had that go into the side of the machine as you talked about today upstairs. But instead, it went into as a sleeve into a question ballot envelope. And the envelope on the outside said ran out of ballots. And then all those envelopes, including the true question ballots of people who didn't meet the criteria for signing the register, all got compiled together.
In some cases.
In some cases. And when, in the case of precinct 840, when the votes were the machine votes were counted here, and the hand count was counted here, and so, there's plus or minus a couple votes here. And nothing unusual for a machine count and a hand count, but the big unusual thing was that there were 205 people on the register more than we had either a hand count or validated machine count ballots for. Okay, so and then because some election recount board workers knew the problem of what I just described, figured out that those 200 ballot envelopes were counted question ballots, and then we found out that those 205 people signed 2 registers. They signed a question ballot register because they got a question ballot envelope to sleeve their thing, and they got and they were on the regular register. So we don't want, there's nothing about that that we like, okay? And that isn't even in the protocols that are in place now, but we want to make sure that that doesn't happen again.
Well, and then there's another issue that happened at precinct 830, Hanshu. And I just verified this week because the precinct chair called me because I'm going to be now working, if anything, this is all getting us involved in the process. For the August-November election, I'll be in Hanshu. So the Hanshu precinct chair said to me, as I was asking nonchalant questions, that they were giving out the question ballots to people who were signing the register, who were there, my neighbors, for example, who got me involved in all this. And he said right there, just, off the cuff, he said, but I didn't understand why I was told by the troubleshooter, while he was told to do that, to treat them like this, because they were all normal ballots. They were card 4. So they were ballots, not that for any reason couldn't go through the machine, but could go through the machine. And yet, these ballots were done, because someone said that these all need to be done as question ballots, and so we don't even know how many.
So these were supplemental ballots that had come to the station?
These were ones that had come that had come there, and my understanding is that the troubleshooter didn't have time to make it down to City Hall, so he grabbed them from somewhere else and brought them, but they happened still to be the same
To
card.
be the right that. Okay, so on that one, we got.
And that's a Title 28 issue too.
Yeah, so that's gonna be, this is gonna be, protocol training. So, training. Yeah, so that's good. Okay, and on Title 28, we need to have, election worker / troubleshooter training. But over here on Q ballots,
And I want to run something by Amanda
election
about
worker
this
/
one.
troubleshooter training. And then on Q ballots, we want to be real clear what's not a Q ballot. I mean, that's what I'm hearing.
Well, here's,
Yeah,
and this is the issue that for Amanda, I don't know, I haven't had time to research it to see where it might be in Title 28, but my understanding, and I was verified by other poll workers, they said that if you could just look at somebody and say, I don't think that he lives in this district, I don't think he lives in this precinct, so we need to give him a question ballot. That it can be a completely, I've seen him in the grocery store, in Girdwood or whatever, and I think he actually really lives there. Anybody can basically say, we need to give this guy a question ballot, and you can just give him a question ballot.
Yeah, I don't think what happened, I'm not buying that.
Well,
But if you go into
It is in
training,
the code.
It is in the manual.
yeah, that if it's in the manual, that if they
Yeah.
don't look right,
No.
Oh, it just says it's.
I don't think it says it that way.
still, that's what you're telling me. Yeah, go ahead.
It says that a vote can be challenged, and if the vote's challenged, that person would vote a question ballot, and it allows the commission to verify that that person is registered.
Right, but that's not at the polling place.
Yeah, yes, yes,
That's
it
I mean, let me ask you this. Is the exercise of the, in quotes, challenge in the manual or Title 28, is whatever is in writing, wherever it is that something that the writing says is to be exercised at the polling station?
It says for reasons that someone would be given a question.
Yeah, that's a
ballot.
precinct, that's not code. So I'm asking her a question about code, but I appreciate you showing me that.
28.50.110, voter identification at polls.
Yeah.
An election official may waive, or let's see.
It's 28 what?
Well, I thought that I saw the right one, but it's somewhere in 28.5.
0.50.
Yeah. voting of voters of suspect qualification,
Okay,
28.50.090.
Okay,
That's where it's at.
Right here.
Every election official shall question, and every watcher and any other person qualified to vote in the precinct. Okay, I'll repeat that. And every watcher and any other person qualified to vote in the precinct may question a person attempting to vote if the questioner has good reason to suspect that the questioned person is not qualified to vote. Now, how's that for vague?
We're not told that.
It says, but it says all questions regarding a person's qualifications shall be made in writing, setting out the reasons, so the person, if there's a worker at the poll, they should have to record why they're making recommendation.
But I'm sure that what they'll do is they'll give them a question ballot and then say, okay, if you're questioning it, then now write.
And then it says a questioned person before voting shall subscribe to an oath or affirmation in a form recorded by the municipal clerk. Holy cow, that's complicated.
Well, an oath is
That's
question ballot.
the question ballot.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
So there it is.
okay, so let me ask Amanda this. So if I come in and I have the right address, which is the scenario that they're presenting, I have an address, I have a precinct card or my driver's license, and it matches everything that's on the register, then every watcher can still decide that I'm attempting to vote, and is there any recordation of the good reason?
Because it says here that even if your address is right, if you're being questioned on those grounds, that you have to affirm how long you've lived there and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty scary.
So in my 3 years of elections, we've never had it reported back to our office that somebody questioned the vote and that's why they had to vote it. But it is in the code, so
It may be in the code, but it's not, we're not trained to do that.
Anyway,
If we are working at rewriting the code, it's just one more thing we can look
So
at.
let's just put right.
Can I say that it did happen though?
2850.090, the suspect qualification. Because whether it's exercised or not, I don't like it. I mean, I don't think it passes muster, even if it has a similar provision in state law. I think that has too much room for.
But it's still
Trouble. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think then this is still Title 28, which is state. And.
Title 28 is not.
Well, that's a bill.
It refers to, that's
To Title 15, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
But during the whole Joe Miller, Lisa Murkowski debacle, they all had poll watchers everywhere. And that's one of the things that the poll watchers were doing. I don't think that that's the whole.
Yeah, let's make sure that doesn't happen to us, you guys.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, I just.
'Cause it
we
could,
just have
it
to be-
could.
Yeah, we don't, that's a good catch. Okay, does anybody want to have pizza, Carolyn?
I believe in me.
Yeah,
You look
we're just gonna
cute.
take
You look
5
hungry.
minutes. No, because Carolyn thought that it would be a good idea to have pizza, and I thought that was a great idea too.
It could be a good
So
idea
now
to
that
feed
we
people.
Have it, yeah, she said we could bring the pizza. The pizza would feed masses. Okay, so, and I'm with her on this, and so, we have some sodas, the pizza, we have a 5-minute break. All right.
Oh, that's what I'm smelling.
Yeah.
Hello.
How did they torture you?
I've had 2 hours sleep and it was from 10 to 12. So yeah, that wasn't my sleep.
Okay, so here's.
No, that was
Come over to my office.
behind this.
Yeah.
Why not it there?
We have a lot of laws in Alaska that stem
She grew
from,
up here.
well, yeah, but I mean, there's a lot of these, well, yeah, she's way younger than me though. They're, I mean, from, when Cont'd was still wilderness, that kind of thing. And this kind of stuff is like, so that, such and such who actually lives in Wasilla doesn't come rolling in and to me, that's what that reminds me of. Is that when you didn't know, that people were still separated by long distances or whatever, and it's a lot of these.
It's antiquated.
Antiquated, it's antiquated, yes, I think.
About time to take a look at it.
Yeah.
Hal and I have
As long as I don't.
Oh, there's soda in there too?
There's no diet.
I know that the, no, but, oh, realize.
As long as you don't require foot tracking.
Yeah, but it's
required.
Yeah, you're supposed to, when I go around, I always go in.
Okay.
Yeah, I always have my phone required.
No, but it's like a debate, I think there's somebody.
So the big debate in the lower 48 is a picture.
That whole section is also. And I haven't done a waiver. But there's I was actually going to mention. Really?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna look at it, but, you know, we, it's like, we use the reference, right? We go to Title 29.
Well, I think the other thing that we can do is, you know,
Updating assets.
Because the state doesn't necessarily,
But I just, sometimes I don't know.
Right, don't worry, I mean, I
The relationship between,
yeah.
like,
But neither do I.
Silent letter.
But they have it right down there that it's a record, but not everything that
That couldn't
is,
hurt.
the way that they do it.
So it is.
Yeah, we just have to
You
see
know, I
that
think
it's
as
constitutional
long-term
and Title 29 must be, and so lots of times it's easier just to copy the state. But this was copied, the latest of this was copied in the state
Yeah.
is 1975. And so it was like this in the state in 1975, it has the state had, and it's still like there, the state had to change it in 1975. Well, a lot of things about
I have a lot of
voting
experience with them.
and things that happened in the last 40 years, or whatever it is, you know, almost 40 years, so.
Yeah.
You mean in terms of like a contest or? Yeah, I mean. It's great how we're doing this. You know, my hope is.
I just wanted, I'm not sure how long I'm gonna be able to stay, but I wanted to make sure that I said this.
Yeah, I saw my home address on the.
That, you know, throughout all of this meeting right now is the first
In terms of,
action given me.
receiving the report.
Yeah.
It was scary, but it
Making that happen for the future.
All right.
So, I really appreciate it, thank you. I made some, whatever shows up on Channel 2 News, you know, takes into account that that was before I became news.
Oh, you went with no cheese.
Because I was feeling,
Get Phil off the
yeah, this is good what's happening, so thank you.
That's illegal.
That goes for you too.
Julia. Would you like me to raise those up a little bit more?
I forgot to wear my long flowing gown.
Well, I understand, but I'm going, you're gonna be writing on the floor, so.
Yes, the ones that Debbie.
Yeah, that'd be
I
great.
I didn't hire.
What do they call it?
Elections happen, or Aaron's having election A and the election B is held.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in that.
Did you not get it?
Oh, I have it. I have it.
Yeah, that was just, you know, getting what the summary, kind of summary.
want my hard drive
Okay.
back one day.
Really?
Yeah,
You want that?
yeah.
Absolutely. I haven't, my husband, you know how the mechanic, the wife of the mechanic, her car is always the one that runs the worst?
Right, the cobbler's wife's children, the wife of
Well,
children goes on the job.
the wife of the sysadmin has the crappiest running computer probably of everybody at this table. And I've asked him, I'm like, look, I know you don't want me to do this. He wants to be the one to hook that thing up so that I can take the information. Oh, he still hasn't. He's in Soldotna until the fish, towards on fishing on June 25th. So is it okay if I still have it until after?
Yeah,
we get back?
I just put.
All I want to do now is
reminder
just
here.
copy it onto my hard drive.
Yeah, I just put in a reminder in your here basically.
And basically, he had everything that he has because he's so tall. Everything, the hookups and everything are way up here and I can't get them. So I'm starting to think that it's.
So, Julie.
Wow, those are really
Okay,
good.
am I
Sorry.
squeezed,
When
all
you-
right, squeeze everything out of all ballots voted in a specific precinct should be issued and stored with that precinct. Have I gotten everything out of that?
Well, that's what my question is.
We really minded, didn't we?
And I know that there are times, and please let me know if this is bothering anyone, when I tend to not digest information the way it's being said. So you may have already said this, and I'm listening and I'm trying to figure out, but when we're talking about the question ballot, and we're trying to find a way to track accountability at the precinct, because that, I think, is one of the fundamental issues that I came across was just this aspect of having the precincts and not having, like, we're not sure where all their ballots went. And I understand if I'm a precinct chair, I may have 5 people come in, and those people may have to vote a question ballot for whatever reason. So when we get to the accountability aspect of that issue, where I was just a little bit fuzzy when you broke off and were discussing, and this is where, bless Amanda, she just said it so well, and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, information. But you take that information, you take those question ballots away from that precinct, because they're question ballots, and then you put because they are a question ballot, and this person voted at precinct 330, and they should have voted at 840. And so then those question ballots should be run with the 840 numbers. But then we still need an accountability of some sort so that 330 has documentation that those ballots were issued so that they can say, we issued, so if we're, like with the precinct stamp, we've stamped them 330. So, but somehow maybe mark them 330 question, and then they run through the 8, wherever. 40.
With the precinct that they're.
Right. But but that accountability report, but then, so somehow we can still go back and track and say, okay, we need to know where all of precinct 330's ballots went, whether they were destroyed, unused, questioned.
There could be a second stamp that's stamped, like colored blue for the stamps that are stamped at the precinct they voted in that say precinct 330, but then they're actually 840. And this happens a lot of times too, because they have to, they have the wrong card style, they have to put it to a facsimile. So there's a lot, I think that there's a lot that we can really pull apart and examine at this point, because there's a lot of things that go on with question ballots. It's not cut and dry, they voted here, and now they are living here, because then facsimiles and all that stuff. So I think that this is a good point where we can have a lot more discussions.
Right.
Okay, and let me clarify something that for my own thinking is, if I come in and I am a dutiful question ballot person, I say, I don't live in this precinct, I'm on my way home, I'm never gonna make my own precinct. And you're the election worker, and you're gonna give me a question ballot. Is that question ballot really just one of the ballots from your stack and a question ballot envelope? Okay, so we need to implement the stamping of everything that goes out to each precinct, then that ballot's gonna have the stamp on it anyway of the precinct that it was assigned to. The thing that I asked her to put on here that I was remembering is I can remember where some of the election workers numbered, or they too somehow, and even if they are numbered, everything that goes out to a precinct may,
3:30.
you know, 3:30 may have to have a stamp on it, yeah.
Yeah, and then, so with their question ballot, they could say that, question ballots, so there were 5 question ballots, and these question ballot envelopes, you know, number 503, 504, 505, 506, were issued to those 5 question ballots.
Right, so the only thing that I'm worried about with all that, and then I'll ask Tom for his concern about it, is that the closer and closer we get to numbering and tracking and having a number, if I only have 5 people, what if I only have 1? Do I have a secret ballot anymore? Okay, Tom.
Well, you put your finger on the concern I have about all this, which is I really don't like the idea of putting any special marks or stamps on individual ballots. I think we probably need to work very hard on trying to create ballot accountability without marking the individual ballots and doing it rather by tracking very carefully how ballots go out, how many are released. In terms of question ballots, and maybe I'm not understanding this properly, but there should be a cover sheet, correct? There should be a cover sheet that says, I'm Tom Stenson. That could say, you know, the cover sheet to my question ballot should say, I voted in precinct 330.
Mm-hmm.
I am actually a voter in 840. Here's my address, here's all my information. And at some point that will get processed. They'll either accept it or reject it, and presumably, if it's accepted, there will continue to be a record that I voted in 330, that I was physically present there, which even if you take the ballot itself and you stick it with the ballots from 840, we'll still have a record that I voted at 330. So
Because we have the question ballot register.
yes. So it
It
seems
shows
like
that you were physically there.
it seems like there's physical accountability for where I voted that is consistent with counting and keeping my vote with the ballots from the precinct where it counts, right?
Except that the ballots and the envelopes are separated, and the ballots are thrown into a big pile.
Yes, no, I understand. I understand that, but if we took all the question ballots and separated them by precincts where they should count, we would still have a register.
That's separate, that's not, David, separate than the actual official ballot and a question ballot, a question versus use. So you can't, there's no way to track it for accountability at any later date.
Yeah, but
Well,
you're saying I'm disconnected from the physical ballot. You're just saying that there is a record, even though that envelope is
Yeah.
connected with a
You
specific ballot.
can't go
The
back and
envelope
find my
is-
ballot and pull it out
But
and
there's an
unvote
envelope
it.
that says that you voted in a
But
ballot.
once you have the sheet, this is a record, that there was a ballot, right? I mean, really, the election system should not be set up so that we can go in and take back people's votes. I mean,
No,
that's-
you shouldn't be able to take back people's votes, but there were people signing the question ballot register and the standard voter register in the same precinct. So how do you account for that, and how do you
You
count
look at the
it?
voter roll, and it has the person signing there, and it has a question ballot.
And then they
Sure.
have some of them where they didn't sign here, maybe it was Xed out, but it's only partially signed over here, but the ID is not checked here, but it's checked here. We literally saw that.
Okay, well then you just fix it with a protocol that says, here's what you do when you have somebody running a question ballot. I mean, it seems like I'm probably going to be the only person who's voting in precinct 330 to have my ballot counted in precinct 840. It seems like you could deal with this just by having a protocol for how to deal with question ballots without basically annihilating the confidentiality of the vote by stamping my 840 ballot as having been voted.
So maybe it's not stamped, but I completely disagree that every ballot needs to be individually numbered.
Okay, so here's again, my facilitator's admonition here is that what I want to do is I want to get through the list to sort, and I don't want to work the issue, but I just wanted to, it's good to acknowledge. We don't have to agree right now, but just know that we don't want to run amok.
Right.
And so that'll be the challenge of the people who are working it. Yes, Linda?
I had a discussion with a election board member during the register process that was very interesting. And it actually changed my mind to where I think that the question ballots should be counted with the district or the precinct where they were voted. Because the point that was made that that's actually voter intent, that if the voter really wanted to go to the other precinct, their own precinct, they would have gone. Or, it isn't gonna necessarily make that.
Okay, so let's
much
look
of a
up here,
difference.
numbering, okay, so question balance is if on the precinct, if by precinct. Then where voted, then one where voted, one, is that what, number one, then one, alternative one, where voted,
Pardon me.
or two, where actually registered. Or where resided. Yeah, or resided, where actually resided.
This is, if I could just insert, this is where the privacy issue comes up. I've had this explained to me by my aide, Monty Jack, who's also a precinct chair and blah, blah, blah. And she said some years ago, the decision was made to just count all the question ballots, the question and absentee ballots as separate precincts, because if, for example, you just had one question ballot in one precinct, and after all the other ballots, the first 100 ballots were counted, and then the 101st ballot was counted sometime later, and when that ballot shows up on the thing, and you know who it belongs to, and the race changes in column 2, you know how that person voted, so their voter confidentiality is lost. But I think there is a way to deal with
Okay,
this.
can we
Just-
work that then? Can we put it on the list to be worked, and then we can go down
That's
those
our
tables?
question ballot was privacy.
Okay, so I'm gonna ask this question again. Have we sucked out everything that we're gonna do today? Not all the answers, but the issues that we want to kind of encompass, because as we break this up, we want to do. So I'm gonna go on to the next one. A percentage of precincts should be hand counted every election. The precinct should be randomly selected, like from the bingo machine. Ballots should be hand counted at the precinct before they are brought to City Hall, including question ballots. Okay, so I'm gonna record this as the first thing about a percentage of precincts should be hand counted every election. And we're gonna put that under the AccuVote accuracy.
That was what the data processing review board used to do. But not at the precinct, here at City Hall. They would count
After the election?
after the election, on election night, they would count, hand count.
As part of the AccuVote true-up process.
Yeah,
to
so they
make
would
sure that the
verify
machine
their results in the hand count.
should be counted.
I think you could classify
It
that.
should be hand count by hand.
I think you
Now,
can
you can put
classify it
count by
as an
hand,
issue
count by
yet to be
hand.
worked about whether whether this hand count occurs at the precinct or
Right, I'm
here.
not gonna record that, that's all.
But, yeah,
work-
that
these are all
can be worked,
suggestions
that
for
can be
working.
worked out later, but.
But I'm gonna put
this
it
part,
there for
yeah.
precinct should be counted by hand, and then we're gonna put it under the Title 28. Because if we are gonna do it, and it's not in code now, then it should be probably worked into code to say that if it's gonna be a machine count prior to, or part of the protocols for machine count. And then as we work that, we'll figure out, just like I'm not gonna put down the bingo machine. But I get the
May I
idea.
also suggest that part of this goes under protocols, under recount, or hand count, or whatever, of having fully designed and written out procedures for conducting a proper hand count.
Okay, protocols for hand count. It doesn't have to be just a recount. What if we,
Yeah.
if we have, if the hand, we may need hand count procedures, even if the majority of everything is a voter, is a machine count. if we're gonna have a.
Well, because if you're doing this,
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
doing
yeah,
this
yeah.
random hand count after the election.
Yeah,
you're
for
gonna
every
need that.
election all the time,
You're gonna
absolutely.
need it all the
I get
time.
it. Okay, is your hand ever up? No, okay. Just checking. Okay, all right, so so now we got the stamp the precinct number on ballots, we may have already fixed this up, have a banker stamp made for every precinct, this way the question ballots can be tied to the precinct. Okay, so I think we already covered that when we did it before, okay. So ballots should be individually numbered, not just the tabs which are detached from the ballot. So, let's go under security, and just know that we're gonna have the same kind of issue, I think, on the closer that okay, so the issue is gonna be numbering ballot, not just the stub, not stub only. And again, the same tension that we just talked about around the table here is gonna be that secrecy of voting is gonna trump everything. So if we can figure a way to do this without jeopardizing secrecy of voting, we're gonna have, it's in there. Yeah, go ahead.
That's okay, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. One thing we talked about upstairs a little bit, that, well, first of all, I think that would be if a vote didn't go through the machine and they had to create a facsimile, they could have, that way they could ID the facsimile with the vote that they match. And I don't know if this is helpful or not, but, one of the things we were talking about upstairs is like, I don't know how you would do it on the ballots, but like for the ID numbers that I use on the books in the library, I have these big sheets of stickers for our barcodes, and they are completely non-sequential. So there's no way of knowing, I can't look at a barcode and know, oh, this book was added to the collection in 2002 because the number is an earlier number. They're completely non-sequential, and there might be some way to put those non-sequential numbers on the ballot so that they wouldn't be readily identified with a particular precinct.
If you did that, how would you check out each ballot? How would you check out a book ballot?
Okay, so put
But you're not doing them by numbers anyway.
barcode.
We're working the problem now. We're working the problem now. Instead of sticking with.
Yeah, but just go by the numbers. up.
Right, but that's still a good idea though, because that was something, as Carrie had said, that Bonnie brought up, and so, we're gonna throw it up here as the barcode or other random numbering.
Could we just add a code site to that too? It's 28.50.180.
Okay,
Number
which
of ballots,
is,
yeah.
That's identification, so it's the privacy issue. So when we get to work that issue, that's the code
Yeah.
site.
Well, never mind.
never mind.
We'll figure it out.
Well, I mean, it's already required in codes, that they be numbered.
I'm sure that
It's
other
required to be numbered on
people
the
that run
stub.
elections
Doesn't
encounter
actually
this
say that
problem
in Title
too
20,
and
it
have,
says the ballot.
so it's something that can be researched to see how other
Right,
places
and that's
have
why we're gonna
addressed
work it.
Yeah,
Okay. So.
you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Okay, so here's one, absentee ballots. Absentee ballots should be automatically counted when there is a recount application.
Actually, isn't that really in code anyway?
Yes, it sure is.
It was, but it was just, they just decided that, well, we're not going to do it even though it's in the code. This is something that we were arguing about all the way through this weekend.
Okay. So somehow when let's see, so on Title 28, so we gotta look at the recount section, which is one of the sections, I think it's a good idea, Barbara, to put them.
Basically want to enforce
We're saying that we should actually follow the law. Just saying.
Because this is already in the law.
Right, but do you know where it is?
But it
I wanna
was
put the
ignored.
reference.
Yeah.
It's gonna be, I think I copied the recount section.
It's under the recount.
Yeah, so what is it, 25? 28, 90,
says recount application.
Yeah, 2890. So it's not there.
2890.010.
Oh,
No, it's started.
okay, so I didn't do the recount one, so.
Yes, you did.
Yeah, you did.
So it's 28, what? Maybe I just didn't do it for me.
We have it at ours, if you wanna look at our receipt.
Okay, I got it. Okay, so it's 2890 what?
Well, I started at 010, but.
But where's the business
Hold
about
on,
that they're supposed to be counted?
It is, it's,
Yeah, I see.
It says the election board
Shall check the number of ballots cast in a precinct against the registrars and shall check question and absentee ballots voted against question and absentee ballots distributed.
Okay, so what section are you reading?
28.90.040C.
Okay. Yeah, so look at that, so it said, I mean, it's not, it's against, they gotta count them against questions and absentee ballots distributed.
For the precinct.
So the way that they do the absentee and the question ballots right now basically contradicts this part of the code. And it doesn't-
Okay, all right, so that's because, okay, so let me see if I get this now. Because we don't keep the question ballots by precinct and don't have the machine countable by precinct, then there wasn't any way to, you could hand count them, but you had no number to,
There's no way
compare
to split them up. So we said, well, then you should just count them all. And so, and actually, this was my suggestion here. If what happens is there's a stall and people say, well, there's no way that we're going to, put them with the precincts. My thing here is, that, okay, fine. Then anytime anybody does any recount, no matter how many precincts they pay for, then that means that you have to count all of the absentee ballots, no matter what. And the question. And you could even put it in such a way that, in the current code, by saying that 2 of the precincts that you must do when you choose a variety of precincts to count is the question precinct and the absentee precinct. Now, whether the community should charge for that, that's a whole other issue, but I think those precincts are automatically counted. I mean, so that's a fairly easy fix if you don't want to change, if they don't want to change the code, is to just add those 2 precincts to the, that those precincts are automatically counted when there's a recount.
okay, I guess my thing to that, and sort of put a slash line, down below, in there, put a slash line in that area, okay, is that whatever we do to this 2890.040, we need it to conform and make sense compared to what the code, as a result of our work here, is gonna say about how we're gonna record and capture question ballots by precinct.
Right. And
It needs to be matched up, because I mean, to me, yeah, they can do that. I mean, I don't know how this needs to be fixed yet, because I don't know what the other fix is that we have to do, but I can see that it doesn't match, the code doesn't match practice now.
Mhm.
And that's because the practice, is to combine everything. We're talking about how to segregate all that out. And when we do figure out how that is to be segregated, we gotta go back and figure out how this works. In the case of a recount also. And that's how I'm gonna capture that, because there's no point conforming code to something that we don't wanna have to encounter anyway, right? I mean, I can make it match, but if what I'm making it match is, isn't, our ideal situation, then I don't wanna go there. But I do want it to make sure that whatever we figure out, so it's.
Well, I can say that as a member of the recount group,
Uh-huh.
that, our understanding of the code was that the absentee and question ballots would be counted because they were part, because they came out, at least for those that came out of our precincts. We didn't know that they were completely separated out. But I think that if we had understood that basically absentees and questions are treated, practically speaking, as if they were their own precincts, and that we had to pay $100 to get them counted, we probably would have either coughed up an additional $200 to have that happen, or we would have chosen them as some of our 15 precincts.
Yep.
As it is, we have a very strong feeling from some of our members that we should get our money back because the recount was not conducted according to the law.
That's what you guys think.
That's what some of our members think. I don't know that I'm willing to worry about, arguing about it. I feel like drop my $300 down on the table and that's it.
I don't care.
We do have some of our members who feel that way.
Because I want my records request, so I'm willing to deal.
Yeah.
With other people's money. But, but when I look at it, because the referral that Dennis Wheeler made, and I'm trying to find it right now, it's somewhere in the counting of votes. He said, well, we do it differently because of what that said. All it said in there is you may separate them out in the counting of votes. It doesn't say you have to separate them out. It just allows that as as that you may separate them out. That does not contradict what it already says for the recount.
Okay, so under here about the absentee and question ballots, then the other thing is that it is to clarify them as, and then put in quote, separate precinct when they're pooled, which is a recount. I said parentheses, but I meant quotation.
I was trying to.
Yeah, separate precinct, SCPARE. Precinct when they're pooled. Okay, so let's back up a second and think about this other piece of, even though I said we're not supposed to work it, we have to figure out what the issue is. In the big scheme of things, the idea for a recount is ultimately going to roll up to whether the vote that was taken, whether the count that was taken the first time, which is generally going to be by machine, is going to be amended by the election board, right? So we're going to have a count, and just for purposes of our example, we're going to pretend it's a machine count. So in order for the machine count to be amended because of a recount, a hand recount, then we have to be able to compare the hand recount to some number that's recorded at the commission level in the original count. Otherwise, I can do all the hand counting, but I don't have anything to amend. I don't know where they are. So one interpretation of this, which was not, I believe, Dennis Wheeler's interpretation, was that, okay, if you pulled them, City of Anchorage, then you're gonna have to figure out how many you have to count to be able to create this thing, because we asked for recount, and so, okay, you didn't do it by precinct, then you better count them all, if you're saying that that's the only way to do it. And I guess I understood Dennis's position to be the flip side of that, which was you only asked to pay for 15 precincts, and you didn't put that in there, and so it's too late now to amend your recount application, and the law doesn't require to, and so then we didn't do it. Is that kind of the status that happened?
Yeah, but there's something in here I missed.
Go ahead.
28.70.040 D. As in double.
Okay, prior to certification of the results of the election by the assembly.
Go all the way down. The facsimile ballot shall be placed with the question, the facsimile ballot shall be placed with the question and absentee ballots of each precinct to be delivered to the computer area for final tally of ballots by,
Okay.
of each precinct.
So how do you go backwards?
It's just basically showing the
That they should be
code
kept with the
violations
precincts.
and how they're.
Well, but it does, I think that, I mean,
The questions and absentee ballots of each precinct are all combined in a big pile and counted together at the end of, as precincts number 120 and 121, or whatever they are. Then how do you get to that sentence that says the facsimile ballot shall be placed? with
because it
the
doesn't
question-
say, as somebody who reads code and writes it, it doesn't necessarily mean that they have to still be kept separately when they're delivered. It means each precinct's is responsible for rolling it up and dumping it in there. And so I'm all for clarifying the code, but I think that, that this by itself is, at least, ambiguous. So, if I was trying to defend it, I wouldn't have known that the facsimile ballots shall be placed with a question and absentee ballots of each precinct to be delivered. And I see why it could be read differently, but
And here's the, it's under ballot review. The ballots shall be counted according to the rules for determining properly marked ballots in section blah, 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 blah. And that is, I'm sorry, 28.80.030, C. No, E, excuse me. 28.80.030E. The ballots shall be counted according to the rules for determining properly marked ballots in section blah, 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 except that absentee and question ballots need not be counted by precinct. But that says need not, it doesn't say they must be not counted by precinct. And yet, so are you going to say that that is going to contradict what it says in 28.9?
Yeah, I'm gonna say that adds to the ambiguity
It
and
adds
the
to the
lack of
ambiguity.
internal consistency within the code. I'm also gonna share with you that because it's online, that it's important, one of the important things that came out of the recount process, is clarification, to the recount in the second bituminous opinion, because, and that's why I sent it out, and it's posted on the webpage, is that the long-standing, Department of Law opinion relied on by the clerk's office was that if the original count was done by machine, then any recount had to be done by machine, using this as the basis for that. And so Tim Bituminous, I didn't agree with that, and so it went to a third-party person to be the arbitrator and to do the research on it, and that opinion is out there. So at least we're not going to have that. That really, it has to be, there is discretion on the part of the clerk, but it has that discretion. So you could envision a situation where the count is so close that a recount of a machine count and a hand by hand, where there's always going to, if you have two hand counts back to back, there's going to be a discrepancy of some few votes. And so there could be situations where that rule could be implicated, a rule could be implicated within the clerk's discretion, but it has to be toward voter enfranchisement and not arbitrary. Yeah, you see? I know he'd get his hand up.
I don't have my camera in my hand.
Yeah, okay.
It seems to me there's two reasons to do hand counts. One is to verify in a close election, and that could be done with a machine. And the second is to verify that the machines are accurate. And so the hand count has to be done for the second one. And I just have one other little question here, and it seems to me, since the election is under the clerk's office, which is under the assembly, shouldn't the assembly's attorney trump the municipal attorney on these decisions?
Hello.
So I'm gonna explain that.
Okay.
And why that isn't. Even though my office and the clerk's office are manned, or in our case, womaned, by people who are appointed by the assembly, unlike the clerk's office, the assembly council is not a charter position. Okay? The assembly by charter is allowed to have staff and legal counsel, can get it by contract, but there's no assembly council position. And along with the municipal clerk, the municipal attorney, and the mayor are the only three actual positions named in the charter as municipal employee positions. And the municipal attorney, even though the municipal attorney is appointed by the mayor, under our charter, which envisioned a nonpartisan government for the city, the municipal attorney is the official attorney for the entire municipality, including the legislative branch of the
I interviewed the mayor on election night and asked about his reports of not enough ballots, and he said, that's not my issue, you need to talk to the assembly about that. So I did get to talk to Dick Trainee, and he said they would look into it, so.
Right, and in this case, since the mayor was a candidate, we also had an assembly member who was a candidate in that same race, that in the case of both of those people, the municipal attorney had to notify them, and did, in writing, that any discussion about the election with him was off base, because, he was conflicted out of discussing.
He the attorney or he the mayor?
He, the attorney, could talk to everybody else except those two candidates about the election. They were not to be asking him about the election, because they were both candidates and they were conflicted out of those things. You're leaving us. Did you sign the register? Okay, thank you for joining us. Thank you. And so anyway, that's it. So that's the best answer I got. Okay, so on the issue, where did I take? Okay, clarify. And so then we want 030 and kind of something, one of those little bracket things that goes down, that has to start up with 28, and go all the way down. Or go down, all the way down, and then make it into an arrow. So good, so good. Okay, stop. Arrow, arrow. Okay, internal consistency.
And just another little argumentative thing to throw in there.
Get your digs in now.
I'm gonna, because it says, except that absentee and question ballots need not be counted by precinct. It doesn't say anything about identified by precinct, stored by precinct, all of that, because what we're talking about here is that the initial count, they don't have to count it by precinct. A recount is a whole different animal. You're going back in and it's basically.
Right, but if we don't figure out
audit.
if they're let off the guard here, then they don't have to be counted by precinct. Even if they're stored by precinct and a recounts to audit it, we're gonna have a potential. It just has to be, when we get to that piece, we're gonna have to bring all these pieces together and make sure, okay, here's our plan.
And that's why.
And then how it goes all the way through, because if we have a plan on what would happen in all
Well,
When we get to
actually, I can
that-
think of more,
Okay,
but
all right,
yeah.
That's good, but I mean, there could be more, it could have been a closer election, for instance.
Oh, that would've
Then I
been
mean, that-
awful.
Yeah. So, but when we get to those and work it, then that's when we have to think about those different things and make sure that the plan, whatever it is that we think is supposed to happen, is then reflected in code, and it doesn't trouble, Tom over here.
Well,
with voter rights.
And that's kind of why the fall guy could be that those two precincts, we're gonna leave them as precincts, that those two precincts are automatically counted. Because one of the things, and I'll say it publicly, one of the things that I now look at, other than the machine being an issue, is a danger of tampering. I see as being the most likely tampering area would be with the question and the absentee ballots. Because, well, for one thing, which is another issue to bring up, is that when they were counted this last time, the way that the state does it is that the people who represent the candidates or the ballot initiatives or whatever for the state, representatives are right there when they're deciding on the absentee ballots, which ones stay, which ones get thrown out, all of that. Same with the question. They're right there in that decision-making process when the poll workers are going through them. That's not the case with the municipality. The people who were the observers for the campaigns, when all the absentee and question ballot issues were happening, had to stand back and couldn't be right up there in there when those.
So it
things
looked
were-
different than in the recount.
Pardon me?
The observers.
Because they
The
claim privacy.
observation situation looked different
Yeah, then they
than
claim
that
privacy
because
because of the envelopes.
because of the.
But it even says in code that people who are observers or whatever can see that voter information. So, actually in the state law. Didn't speak. So it's just very complicated.
Okay, so on that, so. It's funny that I haven't hit any issue that I'm willing to put on the parking lot yet.
Maybe it's just one big party.
No parking.
Yeah, we're out of spots. Okay, so this one, let's have this be the.
Well, that's good, because everything is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I mean, this is like a hard.
Wow.
Hard, okay, so.
I need a vacation.
So absent, so this is gonna be the, it's the absent, it's that precinct thing, whatever we said was gonna be, the absentee and Q ballot.
Yet it somehow needs to be resolved in some way that it's not hard for the public.
Okay, so draw a line under that, that's a different category. Okay, so then, the first bullet here is to look at reconciliation, compare the state code on, initial count. Seems odd, we pick up exactly from state code, all that stuff that's in 1975. All these things that are kind of odd, and then apparently, so that's where I'm gonna put it, and hold on. Okay, let's see, ballots should be automatically counted when there is a recount obligation, so I just wanted, okay, internal consistency. Okay, where do we have the precincts that we should, percentage, where's that business about the separate, okay, clarify separate precincts when they are pooled, and then after that, pooled has to go, on recount, pooled/recount, so somehow I remember that that's all associated with recount application.
Clarify by precinct? Is that what that means? That you're clarifying that which precinct they were actually.
Well, just clarify the separate precinct issue that she's brought up, you know, about the date.
Yeah.
We're referring to it as the.
Which is what I was,
Yeah.
And can we throw in here at this point,
really about the observation process, whether it's reviewing the absentee and question ballots or through the recount. I know that in Title 28 it says just 2 people doing the observation, but it doesn't, I think it was Jeff who had said, it's like at the state level that it's usually 2 people per table is what occurs for the observation during the recount, not just 2 people for the whole room. And so, like, with this last recount, of course, there were 6 tables, but only 2 people were allowed to observe at any time. And I didn't know if that was something that people felt should be tweaked, just simply because, nobody's trying to make, say, oh, we're going to change, like, the outcome, but we do want to make sure the process is clean.
It wasn't 2 people per the room, it was 2 people per issue.
Interest group. whatever.
Interest group.
Yeah.
So 2 of us from the recount group, we could also have 2 people from Prop 5, we could have, or yes on 5,
Okay.
we could have 2 people from no on 5, we could have 2 people from the mayor's race.
It's not, it's not clear in Title 28.
Right. I think they kind of fall back on the states.
Yeah, but so that was just, it just says,
Okay, so since
28.
this is sort of our recount section, so we got that internal consistency, so it's a new
Just clarity
idea.
on the number of observers.
Yeah.
New number, maybe put a little quirky dot from it so that we know it's new. And so this is, observation protocol.
Because then it could be tricky. I mean, you could have 20 different, interest groups with 2 observers each,
For
and you have 40
observation
people in the room. That
number.
might be a little
Number.
overwhelming.
That's why we use
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we got the election board recount workers should not be given the AccuVote numbers. Did we get that? We got blind
Yeah,
hand
we're starting to get into some of the accidental,
No, we got it.
Right, okay, no worries. So we got, I just wanted to make sure that I did have it, we got, it's late for you too. Okay, chain of custody and valid accountability.
Okay, that is a repeat.
Okay.
Take your pen and cross out from
Okay.
chain of custody, down to, what was it? Cross out chain of custody, cross out seals, and cross out 2 people, and then the tech team is the next one.
Okay, so let's go over here with, all issues. Oh, no, it's AccuVote, excuse me. Okay, so now we're gonna put tech team. And this is or reinstate, or / data processing review board. Yeah.
Those will be great. I'm wondering if we might want to start numbering these suggestions at some point so that when we go back and refer to those, we know which one of these it refers to.
Too late.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, we
Oh,
could
some of them
start.
have been fine, some of them have been by.
Well, when I fix what I'm doing, I'll get that and figure it out. I'll
Okay.
Okay, so we have the tech should be available on election day to handle machine malfunction.
Use that.
Well, where do they go? Are they like a rover?
AccuVote.
I know, but I mean, is it where, to,
Just like another troubleshooter.
We
it's like a, okay, go ahead.
I apologize. The Dominion representative is on hand at City Hall on the day of election and assists throughout the day with troubleshooting cards failing and something like that. There's assisting the troubleshooters, and so we do have that in place somewhat, but we could, I'm sure there's ways we could expand on it or.
Okay, so under the AccuVote, let's put, just put tech support for, machine malfunction on election day. And then just put the word Okay, assign troubleshooters to compact geographical areas. Okay, so let's do protocols. And, yeah, and so that's for troubleshooters, and maybe we'll save some space under it for other things. Okay, so bullet 1 is compact geographical areas. All right, what is the override button? That's scary.
Turn to page, if you have the report, if you go to, I tried to take it from, go to the audit issues. It's section.
Okay, audit issues is section 4.
Yes, and go to the,
Ooh, I see the
yes,
third
the
page.
picture of the actual AccuVote machine, diagram of the AccuVote machine.
That's the AccuVote machine?
That is the AccuVote machine. Believe me, that
And then it just has a big barrel thing under it?
Yep. Which is
This is
also,
like a
in this
laptop.
book,
Okay.
this fascinating book called the Municipality of Anchorage Elections. So, which tells you what to do when there's a tsunami.
It
It
does.
doesn't tell you what to do when you run out of ballots.
Or when there's an earthquake.
Or when there's an
Yeah,
earthquake.
okay, well, that's good. Okay, so where's the override?
Well, from what we were able to kind of scan out is there is a portion in the manual, and I think Barbara who left, Barbara,
It's quoted right here.
Barbara, oh, it is.
Yeah, it's right in here.
Okay.
Well, actually, I didn't quote it, I kind of explained it. And some of this I also took from Lupe's description of it.
Okay, we'll read it out to us.
Okay, there's 2 ways in which you can do this, that this quote-unquote override function is supposed to be used. And the fascinating, just a little note, fascinating piece about the AccuVote machine is this diagram is not what's on it, but what is missing from it. Like, do you see anywhere where it says, points to a seal? No, I don't see anything. It also doesn't point to its yes or no buttons, which is what these override functions stem from. And it says there's 2 types of overrides. One occurs when a voter's ballot is kicked back if more than one vote is marked in a race. An error message will appear on the LED screen. The voter is given the opportunity to spoil their own ballot and receive a clean ballot. If they continue to want to try to overvote the race, the election worker can press the yes button. At that point, the ABOS will not count the overvoted race and will count all the other races. Okay, so basically the yes button will, if it's an overvote, it won't count that, it'll count all the other races. Now, the second time is when a ballot is completely blank, the ABOS won't accept it. And so sometimes the ABOS needs to accept it because that's actually the appointed thing from the voter saying, I'm voting.
Yeah, I'm protesting.
I'm
using my
protesting,
ballot
I'm
and
just
I'm
not
gonna
gonna
say,
put anything on the ballot. So in that situation, they hold the yes and the no buttons together. And the machine is forced to count the card, but none of the ballot items. So those are the only 2 times that the override button, at least in the manual, the override function, I should say, it's not a button, is supposed to be used. However, on the day that they were counting and comparing to the register, the precinct 840 service was still short 9 ballots they never counted. And one of the explanations that was thrown out there by one of the election board folks is that those might have been as a result of the override. And that's kind of concerning to me, because if there's these 2 functions where it's supposed to be used, if it's there and there's people that know about it, and since there clearly wasn't much training on this because poll workers didn't know about it, and there are people that know about it and there are people that don't, you want to make sure that a button like that a function like that is used correctly. So, either putting that somewhere in code or putting that somewhere in the, you know, making a protocol, saying, yes, you only do it when blah and blah, and that, you know, if someone's using it for other reasons, then that could be a serious problem.
What does the no button do? What does the no button?
What, yeah, what is, do you know what the no button does?
It's not,
No on every issue.
yeah, it's not used like in this case, but you use, because it's just yes or no is the only two buttons on the interface. But you need it for other things. Just to state for the record, these buttons are not visible unless if you unlock the top part of the ballot box. So it's not as though just anybody could come into the polling place and start pressing yeses and nos. There's only one key at each precinct, and the ballot box worker holds on to that key. And so if this is used at the polling places, that ballot box worker would have to unlock the top of the box and take it down. So it wouldn't be something that would be easy to do without people being aware or knowing, just for everybody's information.
And for me, I, you know, figured as much because so many people didn't know about it, but the concern is that there's so much other information that we're lacking.
Yeah, no, I
That
think
this
that.
is, this is something that definitely there need to be specific protocols.
I think it's excellent. I think that it should be presented in training. It should be, everyone should be aware of it. Everyone should know how it functions and what to do in these situations. I know that it was touched on briefly in training, but I think that there's a lot of opportunities where we can empower the election workers through training to be aware of all these things. So I think it's great to have on the list.
Well, and just to have really specific things that it's only used
Big
for.
focus.
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Tom?
I'm just real confused a little bit about this. Why would that result in a discrepancy between the number of ballots on hand inside the machine and the number of votes cast? Because if somebody passes a blank ballot through, presumably there's a blank ballot sitting in the middle of the machine, right? And if somebody,
But these weren't blank ballots, these weren't blank ballots that they discovered at the recount. None of the 9 extra ballots, or 9 more ballots, or however many.
There
it
were
was.
9 more people had signed the
Then-
register than.
Well, but, yeah, but.
Voted ballots.
Hmm?
9 voted ballots, not according to the active vote.
Yeah, they were apparently not counted in the active vote, but they had stuff on them.
so there were 9 ballots that appeared inside the voting machine whose results had not been tabulated. Is that what you're
Apparently
saying?
so.
Okay.
No.
No, I think with the issue with 840 was signatures in the precinct register versus
Right.
cards cast. So you can count cards cast, not AccuVote machine.
But there was wasn't it?
There was a 200 and some discrepancy, and we had 205 people who signed and registered at the precinct, but we did not have ballots for them. And I agree with your first questions, in that the whole point of pushing these 2 buttons is to have the machine accept the ballot and count it one way or the other. So that as a ballot that was cast, even if it didn't have a result on it, or as a ballot that was cast and there are results for 9 out of the 10 races. So it's not when they were trying to figure out why the machine and the hand count that roughly matched were missing 200 votes on the register, a lot of ideas came out in terms of brainstorming.
And it wasn't that we.
What's coming out of this, though, is that if we have any kind of discrepancy in the future, it's good to make sure that there's more training in this area so that we know what it could and could not account for.
But one of the things is that there were 2 recount precincts where there was a discrepancy. 840 wasn't the only one where there was a discrepancy between
Well,
we're talking about 660.
So let me read my observation notes, because that was me. So, the recount team completed the secondary recount on precinct 660. This was where they were for the total card count only. So, on their first count, the card count came up different than what the AccuVote total was. So they recounted it a second time.
So what does that mean, the card count?
So the actual cards that they have physically in hand
Mean the
for
vote.
660, the votes.
Yeah,
Ballots did not match the active vote total.
and was it over or under?
So the team of two counters had originally batch counted groups of 25, or this is the second time, each stack 25 is checked by each counter, so they did that properly. The final result of secondary recount concluded a total of, this was 7 ballots above the official active vote ballot report. The recount team stated the hand tally from first count overrode the active vote ballot report and stood at the final number. During the observation, when the error of total cards is identified, recount team makes an attempt to find other election records or ballot envelopes in the ballot storage area to clarify any discrepancies. And so initially there were 5 ballots over. They investigated further. They found an additional 2 ballots. And so they came up totally with a total of 7 ballots. So they couldn't, then they started talking amongst themselves that there was no immediate solution for the discrepancy. The final determination as to why there were 7 ballots extra for that precinct in total could never be rectified. So they discovered, and then I discovered through this whole discussion, was that one possible solution to discrepancy, as they stated through the poll workers and the municipal clerk, was the override button. And the active machine, they felt that you can insert the ballot, and it is possible for a poll worker to use the active vote machine override button, in which case it would allow the ballot to enter the machine without being counted at all, regardless if it's voted or not.
Okay, so where do we put
And you got that discussion on video too.
Right, so, but where do we put the override button? We have it in training, or we have
Which isn't anybody in this room.
Yeah.
So text support.
No, it was one of the
It was-
other.
Okay, so AccuVote, so we want to have the override button.
I wonder if they even know what they were talking about.
Right,
Well,
so
and
that's where, there's 2 things about the override button. So here on the AccuVote, we want to find out what the text says about what the override button can or can't do. Because my understanding from what we went over today and what this says that they can do is it can only count the vote, in which case it would never be able to, it only counts ballots. It doesn't allow you ever to uncount. It overrides the machine to make the machine accept and show that the ballot was received. And if that's true, then it's never going to account and be a rationale for why you have more ballots than you have a machine count. It's just the opposite.
But, well, the concern would be though is that somebody actually voted. You push the override button on the ballot. It counts the ballot, but ignores the actual voting. The second scenario.
That would never be a reason why you have more ballots
No, that's
than
true.
you have counted in the machine. We're not on about how you voted or not. So anyway, we want to find out what the text says the button can and can't do.
Oh.
And over here on training, we want to make sure no matter what it is that it can or can't do, the election workers know how to use it. Hi. Anybody who comes in the room has to sit at the table, sorry. Come on up.
I'm close, I'm just staying for a minute.
Yeah, so did everybody else. There's no gallery.
That's the revolving chair over there, Jeff.
Yeah, so right there next to Darryl.
He's having bad memories.
Okay. Somebody took, yeah, you got off the hook earlier today, yeah. Okay, know how to use the override and its capabilities. So that we don't have people speculating that, oh yeah, well, the difference is
Because it could be that the election workers who said that were inaccurate about what override buttons do.
And, right,
We don't know.
right.
And the reason that including it was the concern for me that people, let's just use
Yeah,
the override button. I mean, that's, no matter what it actually does, it's like, let's not,
Oh my God.
let's just not use it. Yeah, let's be happy.
Discrepancy, so we don't even know what it does.
That's why it's good to number the ballots, I'm using the override button, there's a little trash can down here. I'm just kidding.
You're right,
We're using poor Amanda with her gray hair.
Okay.
make the job easier for next year, not more difficult.
Okay, so we clarify in the election training what to do in the event the workers run out of ballots. Yeah, so are we gonna change the code and let them use sample ballots?
No.
So, yeah, go ahead. There is a training manual that we found from the 2003 election that had the instruction that if you do run out of ballots, that you should number the sample ballots and vote them and put them in the emergency slot. I'm just putting it out there as an idea or somehow what people used to be trained on.
Good idea.
I
Okay,
think
so
that
anyway,
there may be
under
other ideas
training-
too, but.
Along with the tsunamis and the earthquake, we gotta deal with ballot shortages. Yeah, I mean, there's another, back east, in like 2010, on a state election, like Connecticut or something, they had a ballot shortage, and they went to court. I mean, they went to court to get all precincts to stay open. You know, where their precincts closed at like 6 or so, some earlier hours, so they had a court order to keep the precincts open until 10 o'clock at night, so that ballots could come out and be delivered, and then all those people just had to wait there if they wanted to vote, yeah.
I mean, I think it's fairly simple. You just say, only in the event that there are no appropriate ballots to use, you can use a photocopy of a regular ballot or a sample ballot. But I mean, the alternative is not letting people vote, and that doesn't, I mean, as unappealing as it is to have people vote on sample ballots, it seems like that's preferable to letting people, to saying, sorry, vote next year. I mean.
Right, and I think that that's what saved us with these election workers, one by one, having to deal and then coming and talking to the assembly. I mean, that really was heartbreaking to hear on the 10th of April what they had to go through trying to enfranchise voters. And so it is hard for me to in the aftermath of that, know what to say to assembly members, including Mr. Traney, about, well, they had to vote on sample ballots. At least they voted, Go ahead, Harriet.
Just like with a bank, you can present a paper napkin that says, here's my checking account number, here's the person to whom I want this $200 paid to, and your signature, and the bank is obligated to accept that and process it, and we should find a way to allow paper napkin voting. If there is a way to account for the fact that the voter voted, that's what I think. But it shouldn't be up to the precinct workers to find the owner of the building to unlock the room where the copier is in order to provide copies. Or I like that solution. Keep the polling place open until the ballots get there. Send a security guard or whatever you need to do. But there has to be a way to allow them to vote when they show up, not at the discretion.
Right, so we need a plan, and then we need to work the plan and have the other. Okay, so what did the next one mean? I didn't understand.
Julie, I'm gonna jump ahead
Okay,
and
go ahead.
ask to add the ballot shortage issue to Title 28.
Yes.
We have
Oh,
to
yeah,
address it
thank you,
there
thank you,
too.
thank you.
Yeah. That's why I was looking for it in Title 28 to find out where it says no sample ballot.
Well, yeah, one thing that it does, I'm not so sure that it says no sample ballots, but I think what it does says is say that each voter shall be given an official ballot.
Right.
And so that's in it, so there's not actually a
Okay.
definition of official ballot. And then under state law, when they ran into this problem, the court said a sample ballot works,
Yeah.
and so that's what we did, but I think that's what it said.
Yeah, it says vote, give the voter an official ballot.
So
Well,
ours got official sample ballot.
Yeah, and if to make an official ballot with, a copy ballot or napkin, having it stamped,
Numbered.
having that particular precinct label it, 660-1 or 660-2, or however they want to do it with their precinct number on there or their stamp or something, just to have, and then on their ballot accountability, I had 7 napkins turned in as well, and therefore, I mean, it's a good scenario.
There's such a simple solution to this. If you print 70% of the ballots for the voters registered, deliver them all to the damn precinct. After you've taken care of the 2 weeks in advance voters and all that other stuff, have it there. There's no reason for them to be in this building, or have them in those geographic
election, we're gonna have so many more people interested in trying to test our system. If we can have 80% show up, right, and so we better account for, even if we print those 70% ballots, what we're gonna do when the 80% people show up.
In the grand scheme of things, the ballot is the smallest part of the whole, tons of material that we deliver to each precinct. You know, chairs, tables, machines, bags, stamps, pens, all this other stuff. And then you got a pile of ballots. And the argument, I mean, the situation here was they may have delivered 20% of the ballots instead of 40% of the ballots. But they delivered all the other stuff. I mean, you would have heard about it if there wasn't a chair there for poll work. And the ballots, somehow the ballots got ignored as being principal to this whole process. And that's what just was a little bit, and it was all printed, and it was all within the boundaries of the municipality of Anchorage, which just wasn't where it belonged.
And look at how much it's costing us because it wasn't delivered
Okay, I'm on address the handling of the sample ballots.
I think it's supposed to be facsimile ballots.
Okay, but copying, also that should be very public process. Okay, so address the handling of facsimile. So this is the facsimile table, really. Facsimile table, possibility of error when copying. Also, that should be a very public process, if it ever has to be done. Okay, so I want kind of maybe over here under, it's not really under security, so we're just using that page for it. Is the facsimile table
Would you put that under your protocol?
as a category? And so I may be getting it ahead of ourselves, but one of the things that came out in a discussion I had, I think with Carolyn, is that, just so we know what the facsimile table is, if there is a ballot that the machine doesn't read, then the ballot goes to what we call a facsimile table. And in my innocence, I thought that we had a special facsimile machine that could transfer by machine these funny ballots onto the right kind of paper, but that's not. The facsimile table is manned by election workers, and they hand transcribe what it looks like to them that the voter was trying to vote onto a card stock that the machine will read. And then it's entered into the machine. Okay, so then if you have a hand count of that, then, and it's stapled, the card stock one is stapled to the hand count one. And so they're kept together, you know, even without a numbering system.
They're not
sliced. Okay,
they're just on top of each other.
okay. So they're together. Yeah, maybe paper clips, okay, but anyway, they're combined. So then, if you have a hand recount, as we had here, the question apparently became, do we count the facsimile ballot that went into the machine, or since we have the voter's true ballot in a hand count, do we count their true ballot? And the answer apparently was, oh no, we have to count the machine count. Was that the answer that came back? Okay, so that, yeah, that should be a recount issue. I think it should be a Title 28 issue. And I think it should be a facsimile table issue that we need, yeah, go ahead.
I think that this should go in Title 28. The process that they use for facsimile is always in teams in two. One person reads and the other person records. Or maybe not necessarily in Title 28, but that is, so it's not just two people, but it's like each having an individual part of it, working as a team.
Why do we even
Right,
make
but I don't
facsimiles? Why don't we
understand
just hand count and let things be
Yeah,
done with
that's
this thing?
Exactly.
That's what I was.
That's
I
the
mean,
trouble
why
with
do you?
writing code for a machine, it's gonna be obsolete in fairly short order. That's-
Well, and even if it doesn't, even if it's not, to me, the same amount of time that would go in for doing that one record and one do is like Carolyn said, why don't we think about just having it be that instead of a facsimile table, we have a hand count table?
Because we have a whole other issue with storage of facsimile, in that, yes, the facsimile.
So what I want, excuse me just a second. I want to have, the put the teams of two, as she said, but we want the actual facsimile team protocol to be set out there. Teams of two for facsimile protocol.
There's also, we were told that there was, this was all a public process of doing that, and I never even heard of any such thing as doing the facsimile recount. So, I mean, there
Okay,
needs.
so let's put here, so,
It's
proposed
a-
process, question mark.
Yeah, how to make it a true public process, there needs to be the ability to have public observers to ensure that. And then another additional aspect of the facsimile stuff is, if you're doing a hand recount, I'm pretty sure that at least some of the hand count teams were checking and making sure that facsimile matched the original, but there's nothing written in the procedures. I'm not sure that other hand count teams were doing that.
Well, they couldn't, I don't know where they all were because Jeannie could. Jeannie actually saw
Okay, so here.
some that were not the same.
But that
was on the recount. That was the second time we counted, not the first time.
Protocols. And the point
It was not the first time.
Do they count the ballots?
Well, she's trying to talk.
Yeah.
I need to mention, because there's two different procedures. There's two different procedures for storing facsimiles with their originals. And we discovered that the first day of the hand
Well, it
count.
took us a day and a half to figure out that there was these differences.
Yeah, and they pulled the wrong facsimiles out and counted, and nothing was matching, and everybody was freaking out. And what it turns out is, with the question ballots, and it may have something to do with the size of the precincts as well. The question ballot facsimiles were stored in a separate manila envelope from their originals. And when one of the now no longer employed municipal employees was asked why, well, how do you keep them together? He said, well, they're
Kept in the same order.
They're kept in the same order in these envelopes. Well, because the wrong ones were pulled, and they were going through just the facsimiles to count them, all of those, the order was completely destroyed. So they were never gonna be able to match those up. So I mean,
I had like 100 and some ungodly number.
Yeah, 100 and whatever
123 or
facsimiles
something like,
in the-
of the question facsimile ballots. They were counting, before it was discovered that the wrong facsimiles had been pulled, they were counting this pile of 123, sorting and resorting them. They were the facsimiles that they were counting, by the way, not the originals. And then they had to uncount them after it was discovered that they were the wrong facsimiles.
Well, which is a blessing in disguise because then it was the wrong ones anyway, because they had been, what you were telling me is they were irrevocably separated.
yes, forever.
Forever anyway, so if we ever had a protocol that said count the ballot, it wouldn't have happened then.
And to me, and I, understanding that if you have that many facsimiles, then you're talking about 20 manila envelopes. If there's ever a reason just to hand count the damn things and say to hell with facsimiles, that's a reason right there. So, I mean, it's,
About facsimile rationale for.
Well, I got protocols count ballot or machine vote, and so I think that that's kind of where I'm
Thank you
at.
for-
Okay, thank you, Jean.
thanks, guys.
We should think about when we want to reconvene before we lose more.
I'm not going anywhere.
I would actually suggest that we talk about it fairly soon and maybe think about,
You've only had a couple of hours of sleep.
yeah.
Right,
So my daughter's seen me very little over the last 4 days. So, and I mean, if I have to, I'll just go and you guys can continue, but
Well, it is a Friday afternoon.
It is
so let's-
Friday, that's
So
the
let's
other
think about this. Because
there's gonna be a whole
once
other.
we get through, there's gonna be another one of this, but it would be helpful if we got through any more that I have any questions on at least.
list
thing
is
is,
gonna change.
right, the other thing is that you could pick up where we left off in terms of the new things for the change. So that, even though your list is going to the assembly and not all the assemblies here, at least if, after you did that big list, if you do the, it would go to the clerk's office. I can't distribute to the whole assembly.
No, I'll distribute to the assembly. What I was gonna say is you could distribute it to the list of the people that were here that you have.
Yep. And so you're gonna remake it for the assembly anyway.
Right.
But on the one that you sent to me, it would be great if in like that grocery list subtotal, that I had a place on it, but then I started, for the end of what we
Well,
haven't covered here, right?
You mean like mark it, like I just did here, just mark it right here while we.
Yeah, where we leave off.
Right.
Then in terms of scheduling, I'm gonna be unavailable from about the 24th of June, through July 12th, although I am gonna be at the assembly meeting, but my 95-year-old dad is coming up here, and I'm gonna spend as much time with him as I can, dispatching my boat to go get him and bring him back, and then we do the same at the end, there, and so at some point having to make that trip from Washington DC area all the way up here if I don't spend a lot of time there,
So, as far as for meetings, I am unavailable starting in about 10 minutes until I get back from Solana next Sunday. So that Monday, so that's what, the 22nd, I think? 25th. Because I think the 23rd is the 25th, yeah, 25th. Well, you can meet without me. I mean, it's just it. I mean, okay, early next week, I guess I can, I just can't meet for hours. Because I'm leaving I have to be ready, I have to be packed and ready Tuesday night. So I can meet Monday.
It seems to me that what we should do is that we should take this and keep the headings and stuff like that, and get that out.
That's probably good.
And then, because I'm not sure that you're gonna have another, where's the other, how soon were you thinking you were gonna do the replacement list?
Oh, this weekend, early weekend.
Okay, well, just send me the
Maybe tomorrow.
replacement. Yeah, so if you're gonna do the replacement list,
Because I have to call,
we'll,
most of them I think were Mel's, and so I have to touch base with her and make sure we have all ours on here.
okay, so in the meantime, we can try to be doing this, when that comes in, we can try and take our shot at seeing what else we wanna focus the next thing on. But at least we got a big starting place here for related ones, right?
I think where we left off is the next one on the list that, as it exists right now, is review qualifications of the election commission.
Well, let's finish that page today, so let's put.
Okay, this is the last one
So
on that
let's-
page.
Under backing up, I'm like,
So under training, I'm not gonna do it under training, but I'm just gonna record it, there's another heading, which is the election commission. New header, like a purple.
What's this, election commission?
Yeah,
Okay,
so let's just work election commission for a
okay,
minute here.
good.
So we want qualifications. And I don't know about review, but we have to be thinking about, like other board, it wouldn't be exactly like this, but other boards have, different disciplines represented there.
I had to do a short little rant, it's very short.
Go for it.
As Com over here stated, the question ballot envelopes have a space on top where you say where you're voting, and then a space, and correct me if I'm wrong, Amanda, and I believe a space like in the middle or the bottom of the envelope or something, of the precinct that you're from. Okay, so you have those two different numbers. The election commission is in charge of the question ballots. And the way that the one of the ways that the election board found the question ballots that really weren't question ballots for service high is they looked and saw, oh, look, 840 up here, 840 right there. You know, ding, 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 that person really was voting, you know, a regular vote, it really wasn't a question ballot. If I were on the election commission, and we already knew that all these people were voting fake question ballots, that probably would have been the first thing that I was looking for, since I was in charge of the question ballots. Yet 200 of those, less, got by them, and that's only.
In one precinct.
In one
And they all
precinct.
said voting out of, or ran out of ballots on it too. There was another additional thing on that too.
Yeah, I mean, if you, well, service section doesn't say ran out of ballots, it shows that it did, but it doesn't have that little red mark on the ballot availability like a lot of the other ones did. So it's skated by me at first too, I didn't think that it ran out. But when I went back and looked at it, oh yeah, okay, they did. But the thing is, because we have to look at it in this perspective, we only recounted 15 precincts. I don't know how many other service highs are out there. I don't know. And this is the only thing these people have to do, really. This is their main job, is absentee and question ballots. And yet they signed off on this election. And yes, Gwen Matthew has been awfully quiet since the recount as well. We haven't heard her crowing anywhere. And I'm sorry, did I say that out loud? You know, I mean, it's ridiculous. This is something that's so simple that they should have caught. They should have caught this. I'm sorry, yeah.
Well, I just, to spring off of what you're saying, and to sort of bring it back to this, what I was gonna say is, maybe what we should do is we should look at the role of, the future role of the election commission, and then decide what their qualifications should
Right.
be, because
Okay, so
if the
that's
commission's role is gonna change.
Roles and responsibilities,
And then talk
roles,
about qualifications.
responsibilities, and qualifications.
Thank you. Because I could rant on this for.
But, yeah.
No.
Okay, so that's not the model that we wanna, you know.
I mean, I know, and I'm not going to.
Right, okay, and so the other thing that I wanted to bring up, that Tom and I had talked about offline, that sort of fits into here, is that, one of the commission's responsibilities is gonna be, the election commission is the assembly's fact-finding arm. Okay, so you can write that down, that's just gonna be given. And in that fact-finding arm,
Underline the fact, please.
Fact finding. Okay.
And then finding.
Right. All right.
Finding.
Okay.
Finding.
Okay, so as the fact-finding arm, one of the things that Tom and I talked about is that when we have a troubled election and they have to find those facts, that, and so I just want this idea to be captured, that their fact report, even if not subject to public hearing for adoption, is posted and subject to public comment. Because that way, analogous to other things, even certain board appointments, we put it out there, and then we don't have, the assembly doesn't have public hearing on whether this is a good person or not. But if there's, you know, the person has an arrest record that maybe hasn't shown up any place, or was caught, you know, in different compromising situations, people in the public have the ability to, you know, say, hey, you've got a problem here. And then the assembly has, you know, kind of an area to instruct the commission to go look, or to have a private, an independent investigator, or.
I like private investigator.
Yeah. Sometimes we need that too, but anyway, that was one idea about the election commission.
Julia, I'm
Yes.
sorry I had to step out
Yeah,
and
no
check on
worries.
our offices. In the roles and responsibilities, did you discuss the chain of command for the election commission?
Well, that's good too, chain of command.
What is the chain of command?
Yeah, that would be good. Yeah. Now, what is that?
What is it? Yeah, is
Well, what I think is, like Julia said, the chain of command, that they're the fact-finding arm for the assembly, not the clerk. They don't report to the clerk.
Oh, interesting.
The clerk gives them coffee and pizza and things like that. I mean, but we don't tell them what to do.
Barbara, can I just say right now that I love you? But don't tell anybody because I'm evil, so.
Still recording this, right?
Yeah.
Well, I just think that needs to be clarified, and so the question is and the issue in this most recent election is what happens when the election commission has a conflict with the clerk's office. They need to know who do they go to, and that's what we need to clarify.
Yeah, because it's not gonna be to the municipal clerk.
Anymore, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it just should.
Yeah, you can't have the election commission be the independent fact-finding arm of the assembly.
Mhm.
And then under the yeah,
Maybe
so that the highest that they go ever is to the municipal clerk, because that contradicts their role as independent fact finder.
That's really weird too, because their role of sorting out the question and absentee ballots has to do with protocols and.
Right.
I mean, it's like they have two different roles that are in conflict with.
If they messed up.
Well, that's
Yeah,
why
and
I think
that's-
it's important
yeah, they
to
did a
go
great job of
and talk
self-investigating,
about the
didn't they?
roles and responsibilities of the election commission, because we may need to have an election commission that rolls up all these different county boards
Mhm.
and have it come forward, because we have two of the people that were on the recount board to count were also
Absentee by mail board.
also the absentee by mail board. That's different than the commission. And so
Well, maybe some of them are still
somehow
running, but-
we have to figure out how those roles can go. Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
In talking about the chain of command, the other thing we should talk about is the role of the chair, especially in the context of an assembly election year. We have mayoral election, but if we have them report to the assembly, they're going to report through the chair presumably. We may want to have a special provision. If the chair is up for election, the chair probably should not also be, like, if the chair is the incumbent in one of the assembly elections, we should probably have like a designated election chair who will be the contact for the assembly, who is not a contestant in the election that's being challenged.
Okay, so we want to record the teeny tiny. And we have to take care of conflicts from candidates. Candidate conflicts. Yes.
This is not directly related to that, but is there anything in the municipal code or the state code that deals with someone intentionally trying to interfere with or disrupt an election?
There's nothing in municipal code. There are state laws about that. You know, about different things, and there's voter fraud, and there's stuff like that. And Carolyn and I had a conversation a little bit about that. And so it's my understanding that intentional interference, no matter how it manifests itself in state code and what it would be called, is going to be a specific intent. I mean, it's criminal, probably, and an intent needs to be proven. And so the hard part about ever prosecuting or threatening anybody with prosecution
In other
is,
words, prosecuting Minnery.
yeah, is that it's hard to demonstrate to law enforcement or
But
to
it's hard
a
to
district attorney's
prove
office
intent.
to prove intent.
In most
But there are
cases.
some other things, yeah, well, yeah, so there's some circumstantial things. There's also, and I haven't had a chance to look at this, but years ago anyway, 10 years ago at least, there was still on the books here, in state law, the private attorney general right of action. And it seemed to me that that was an area that somebody beside me, who was concerned about this election, may want to look at in terms of the state side. The other thing that had occurred to me was that if, you know, with people dividend, they've been signing up for that, you know, for a bunch of years. And so, I mean, in that kind of situation where there's something on the books and you need to show intent, the first place that I look is where they are intending, because it's not,
Well, you could see
it's
if
that they
voted
knew
in the
or
last
should have known.
election
You know, the
in their own
intent thing
precinct.
is gonna be knew or should have known. It's not gonna be ignorance of the law, that they, oh geez, I live in Palmer, I didn't know, I work in Anchorage, I thought I could vote. That's not the kind of input, you know, that's not gonna defeat
And
somebody doing it.
180, I mean, considering how hard the candidates were working to get people to come to vote, to get 180 people who don't even live in the area, in the jurisdiction to come and vote, that's a lot.
Conservative Patriots Group was pushing it on their emails, and they actually took credit for a lot of people showing up, so. And they're a valley group.
And some of those two were from all over Alaska, and a lot of them were at UAA. So I think that a portion of those, you know, were students. This was their first election. There was a big get out the vote on the campus. I mean, I think that there were some that just sort of. I think that
Which I'm sure happens every election.
yeah, it was just innocent.
Right, and people who move from one place to another.
But not 180.
I think there, we should, if we're gonna rewrite this, I think that we should have something in there. You know, if you are in precinct 320 and you move to 480, not a big deal in general. But if you're coming from the valley, you're coming from Kenai, whatever else, unless you're a student, if student I get, you're winging it. But you should be prosecuted and you should be held accountable. And
Trying to vote?
Conservative Patriots Group
For
telling
trying-
people to come into Anchorage and vote.
Well, maybe
When they live in the
the
valley.
Patriots should be prosecuted.
Yeah, see,
But I'm not sure if the individual should be, because, well, it could be that stupid.
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, if you're not gonna pay attention and you're gonna do something you shouldn't do. at what
Then you
point
end
are
up having a chilling effect. So,
Well,
I mean,
know.
I mean, just
yeah.
think about it. I mean, you just have to think about it, because the overall maxim here that we have in general be worried about is that oftentimes bad facts, you know, gets reflected in bad afterlaw. You know, and we don't wanna do it.
That's
We wanna
true.
be
That's
better
true.
than that. You know, so we wanna get it all out here. We wanna talk about it in a way that we can, you know, process it, but just be aware, because it's, you know, we have trouble getting enough people out to vote.
Right.
You know, and now somebody's gonna be criminally prosecuted for showing up at the wrong precinct, you know, and they don't know where they are, or they're outside.
If it's the wrong town.
I'm all for
I
it.
think
I know, it should be. I mean,
The
but
system-
there is a problem with
Precincts.
us.
I turned
The
right
system
in
should be
Canada.
able to catch it.
Exactly.
I know, because I've heard there's other issues of people who have voted absentee, especially people my age and older, and then aren't sure if they did or not, and go in and try and vote again later.
Hey, that's us in the future.
Did I
And-
vote?
Yeah, did I mail that?
What we said that we were gonna do, Barbara, while you were out of the room, is we wanted to finish up that one page. We're gonna, Linda, as you told the group upstairs, is gonna be kind of reformatting this list of things anyway.
Yeah, pulling out the repeats.
Yeah,
and
putting
adding
out
the ones
repeats
that
and reinserting some that Mel had that got dropped.
Not just me, not just me.
Not just hers, there were other
Yeah.
ones that,
And, Linda's gonna be, going downtown. Yeah, she's gonna be fishing, and I said about my dad being here. So as a group, it's possible that we might not get together until after the next assembly meeting. But we're gonna try and, capture this stuff, we being my associate here.
This is just more or less a point of observation here, but, and it's possible that there were other reasons why certain people weren't here who were concerned with this whole issue that we have here. But I am kind of wondering why members of the assembly who are now on the newly reconstituted elections and ethics committee weren't actually here. volunteer
Who may
for
be,
this.
actually,
I can-
like chair them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Be the chair?
Yeah, yeah. So-
And I'm hoping that that isn't an indication of them not having the will to follow through with what we're beginning to work out here.
Yeah, so I'll give you my take. I find the group a lot easier to work with when I don't have so many people here. You know, they get in my way at this stage. I mean, they just do. And so they were generally invited to attend if they thought they had to come down here, but they were encouraged by me not to. Because we only had so much time, and I can't go back to ABCs with each one of them on this stuff. And so what I want to have happen out of this group is that I want to be able to roll up our ideas to them instead of having the newly constituted election group tell us and me where I have to go run and fetch. Okay? And so I'm trying to get ahead of it.
I understand that.
As fast as I can.
I understand that, that
on
helps
doing
a lot.
that. And so then when we're ready for them, then we'll make sure that they're ready for us.
Okay, I understand that, that
Okay,
does
I mean,
make
that's
sense
just,
to me.
that's just.
So,
I
I'm
have
glad I
no
said
question.
something and that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did too.
Well, just so you know, I've known Julia for about 20 years. When she says she wants them out of her way, this is hockey, you get out of her way.
I wanted, there's one other, because we're doing the election commission, so that,
Yeah.
since we're gonna be separated so long,
Yeah.
there's one other thing on here, that I wanna make sure gets up there with the election commission issues, because it's a good suggestion. Appoint a citizen oversight election committee to meet with assembly election committee members. So to have citizen,
So you have an advisory committee? to
like
the
an
election
advisory
commission.
committee, basically.
Okay.
A citizen
Okay.
advisory.
Okay, so the thing on
Not
the
appointed by the
election
mayor.
commission, the biggest challenge that we're gonna have in figuring out what to do about the election commission is we need people who are really excited about elections, but are willing not to be engaged in any political activity. That's the criteria, and that's kind of a hard window. I already tried to talk to Carolyn about this, and she's like, not me, but
Does that
other
mean
people.
if someone has made a contribution, they can't do it?
Well, I don't think that if it's already made a contribution, maybe at the upcoming election, I'll have to look at it, but they have to stop. I mean, it's like the ethics board or APOC. They can't be
So this is
participating.
So you can't be a Democratic delegate?
Then you
That's
can
not-
tell candidates, I'm on the commission,
That's
I
right,
can't.
that's right. You can do your civic duties and participate. And it's a big go to jail, get out of jail free card by doing that. But that rule is consistent with what's in code for the clerk's office, my office.
What is the specific rule?
The rule, I think, says that you cannot engage in municipal elections, and you can't engage in partisan politics, something like that.
Or protest.
At all, partisan project?
Well,
Just municipal?
it's not all, because I think that you're supposed to be able to vote.
Yeah,
Okay, so-
exactly.
Yeah, so you get to vote.
Yay.
And I think that the current code may be more focused on municipal elections, but it's been interpreted to be all, other stuff,
I
because.
guess the timing is the important part, from when to when.
Yes.
It
So-
looks like it's from employment.
Yeah, for us, but he's talking about for the
Oh,
commission.
okay, got it,
commission.
Yeah. And so we'll, look at, and then we also have code amendments that we get to make about that, because in rewriting 28, we get to think about that. But in general, the challenge has been getting election commission people traditionally to serve at the little stipend of $9 an hour. $12. Okay, maybe. $12.
Okay, then I'm in. No, I'm kidding.
And then, and to not be engaged in any political function, and then that is gonna be the same as your advisory board, because if we open up an advisory board, then believe me, we can have that advisory board stuffed with all kinds of partisan
Okay.
things, and that is like a giant step backwards for
here's my problem, okay? And I'll say this out loud on the record. There is no way that Gwen Matthew is not a partisan politico. I don't care what her employment record says. I don't care what any of that says. I know who she affiliates with. I know what she does. She is. So the thing is, what you basically have to do is you have to be sneaky and you have to hide what your affiliations are if you are affiliated with them.
So you're saying she didn't hide it very well, so maybe.
Yeah, she did Debbie found it.
You know, you're not ever gonna be able to hook somebody up to a lie detector and tell what their secret.
Well, exactly. So, I mean, so to some degree, I have to wonder.
Okay, it doesn't mean that you can't be a closet, just not to follow, not to be your example, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a closet liberal working in a very conservative municipal organization. Okay, so because you get to, where you can't be making, you can't work on people's campaigns. It's not an inability to associate with people, and you don't want it to be that.
And I like to a certain extent, I mean,
It's about-
it's better to be able to declare, you know, you've got so many Democrats and so many Republicans.
Exactly.
And so many independents, and to be able to balance then, but I mean, this is a nonpartisan election, so you don't have that.
That's right.
And
So
that's
I
the problem.
can't, and so I mean, it's the challenge about that, because you don't, it's not that you have to be all undeclared, but for whatever we're working on, you can't be, treasurer for somebody's campaign, you
But-
can't have it.
But if it's nonpartisan, I mean, to what extent should the Republican Party and the Democratic Party not be involved at all with the elections and not make contributions? And I'm not sure to what extent they do, or if they do.
Yeah, all of that is a good question, and outside the scope of what I gotta do here.
I'm gonna
Yes,
sign off.
okay.
I want to say one more thing, which I already said to Julia, but, this session right here is the first thing, period, throughout all of this, that gave me any confidence
And
that
hope.
things might change, and hope that things might
Yes,
change
I
for the
absolutely
better.
agree. I can't talk too much.
So thank you.
Okay, it's Carolyn. Yeah, Carolyn and I had some good discussions on this.
And there will be more. We'll
Yeah.
get together, we'll keep talking.
Keep